Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the September 24th meeting of the Town of Wareham Board of Selectmen and Sewer Commissioners. Tonight we have the pleasure and the privilege of meeting jointly with the Town of Wareham Finance Committee. They are awaiting for one more body, so they have a quorum. We've just snuck by ourselves with three. In any event, from the Selectmen's perspective, the primary purpose of tonight's meeting is to hear from the various petitioners who have articles upon the fall 2013 town meeting warrant. It's an opportunity for them to come before the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee in one night to make it more convenient for them to provide both boards with an opportunity to ask questions. From the Board of Selectmen's perspective, we will not be taking any favorable action votes tonight. We will not be having any discussions amongst each other on the merits of the proposals. That will come next week. Tonight is simply question and answer and information gathering time and an opportunity for the petitioners to articulate for what they like to see town meeting do. With that, may we have the roll call, please?
Roll call. We have Selectman Whiteside, Selectman Titlebaum, Selectman Holmes, Selectman Slavin, Town Administrator Derek Sullivan, and Town Council Rich Bowen.
Okay, I believe we have one announcement.
Got a couple.
Actually, Selectman Slavin has a couple, as usual. I guess Selectman Whiteside does as well, so everybody's announcing.
Repeat one that we've had several times. We have a benefit for Mr. Flugel on September 27th at the Box Mill facility over at Tohonet at Makepeace. Judy, you remember what time that was? 6 to 11. We have for Onset Village Music and South Coast Centers for the Arts on Thursday, the 26th, 7:30 Community Band. Friday, the 27th, 6 to 8 Poetry Night. Saturday, 7 to 9 Open Mic Night. Sunday at 4 o'clock Student Showcase. That's at 2510 Cranberry Highway. It's approximately across the street from the gas station, just past the police station. It's a new location for them. Wareham Garden Club presents Autumn Days Plant and Bake Sale, September 28th, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Old Methodist Meeting House, Main Street, Wareham. Perennials, herbs, wreaths, birdhouses, fabric pumpkins, chicken wire baskets, fairy gardens, scarecrows, wire wrap bottles, and homemade apple pies. For those who need flu shots, the Board of Health is doing their flu clinic again this year. It's Thursday, September 26th, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., Town Hall Cafeteria. That's the bottom floor. Then on Thursday, October 3rd, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m.
Selectman Whiteside, any announcements?
Yes. Yes? No? Is it working?
Are you picking up the sound over there from this microphone?
Yes? Okay. I just want to congratulate the DECAS parents and support group for completing their wonderful playground last weekend a day early because of the rain. I also want to advertise something that the West Wareham Academy is selling. It is the West Wareham Academy Community Cookbook. And for those of you who like JAG, there is a real Portuguese JAG recipe here. You can buy this for $10 at the West Wareham Academy. Speak with Wendy Miranda. And I guess maybe you could get it through the superintendent's office as well. It was put together as a fundraiser for the students at the school to help them learn responsibility, bookkeeping, cooking, and also how to put together a product. This was presented last week at the school committee, partly by one of the students at the academy. It was an extremely well done presentation, and I urge you to spend $10. It's a really good $10. Also, if you're cleaning out your gardens, you know, splitting your plants and stuff, I know that West Wareham Academy would love to take some from you. And I'm sure that the garden club at the high school would as well. I can't speak for the other buildings, but I guess I can speak for the middle school as well. But splitting gardens is a very easy way of passing on what you have.
Selectman Holmes, do you have any announcements this evening?
Yes, the announcements. I actually continued my tour around, and I want to say that last week I spoke about the mobile home park over on Cranberry Highway. And I also want to commend, I noticed a ton of houses that have cleaned up yards, put up new fences, done some painting around town. And I want to say that I don't know if it's because of the a new civic pride that is arising, or the beatings we've taken over trash, and Dave getting up every week and Sandy telling people to pick up the trash. But I got to tell you, I've really noticed a really large improvement in town. And so I want to commend all those homeowners that are picking up as well. To those who want to talk to me about my grass in the front, I'll get to that sidewalk maybe this weekend. If it's sunny, I'm at the golf course. I did happen to visit a new place this week. I hadn't been there in quite a while, and that was the driving range over by, was it Mazzelli's? Garden, you're right, farm stand. And I want to say that those young guys over there really have stuck it out to make a business work. Not a lot of money in driving ranges, but they're a real pleasant group of young men to go and visit. So if you're feeling a little weak in your game, as I am, you can go and do that. Tonight, I want to take a turn away from that, and I want to give a shout out to somebody. I don't typically do that, but this is a shout out to a young woman who, for the last year and a half, has been feeling very sick. She has, in my mind, shown great bravery, going to Boston a couple of times a week and getting chemotherapy, and at the same time raising just a remarkable young boy who's 14 months old, 15 months old. And I just want you to know, honey, that your friends, you and Wareham and Onset, are praying for you, and we're very proud of you. And then shout outs to my daughter Heather. I appreciate your indulgence. Thank you.
Thank you. Heather has our support and prayers as well. Thank you. Let's see. We had intended to go straight into with the petitioners. We can wait a little longer. We do have one item on the list that may take us a little bit of time to go through. But that's, Mr. Chairman, if you want me to hold off, I'm more than happy to, and to take that matter up, and if you'll just bear with us while we...
At this point, we're not deliberating or voting either, so we can comment as citizens until she arrives, and at that point, then we'll open our meeting. It's up to you. She should be here anytime. I know that she was on her way.
Well, what's the pleasure of the board? I was going to take up the Hammond School matter, but if we want to wait...
Oh, we can just keep
Thoughts?
rolling along, and it would benefit when we're waiting for one person.
Pardon?
Are you waiting for one person? Yeah. We can just wait. Are you sure she's coming? Yeah. So we can just keep rolling and then kick in when she gets here.
Okay.
That way she don't miss it.
Okay, then let's, we'll hold off for a little bit then. Let's skip down to item 9B under town business. This is the continued discussion and vote on the Boys and Girls Club contract for Hammond School. We have, once again, a document before us. This is a substantially changed document from the first one, I believe, that crossed this board's desk. I hope everybody's had an opportunity to take a look at it, and let's open it up for discussion. Selectman Holmes. I'm going left to right, so.
Oh, all right. Well, is this close enough? Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I don't support this in its form. As the administrative branch here in town, and I think this is one of the reasons why leases, especially of town buildings, are supposed to come here, because we're supposed to do an analysis of not what feels good, but actual fact-finding. This building, and I don't really want to go through the whole story, but this building is currently under the custody of a school department. And because of that designation, any repairs and needs of that building would come from the town of Wareham. So that's my first issue. The second issue is in Mr. Bowen's fine diligence of putting my clause in here. If you read this clause, actually the contract could be terminated as soon as you sign it, because under the termination of lease clause it talks about repairs to the rental property that exceed the amount of rent paid within the last 12 months. Well, it's September. I don't know, I think maybe there's been some money that's changed hands, but by best calculations, that building currently has repairs already in 6 figures that need to be done to that property. Certainly they don't all need to be done today, but they will need to be done. And that's not mentioning repairs that are about to come in the future, like a boiler or a furnace or a roof or things like that. So I could almost call on the termination of lease clause before the lease is even signed. And where is the money going to come from for these repairs? If the building stays in that custody, the money comes from the town. Our CETA director and CETA board have done quite a bit of work on this particular property over the last year or so, and there is a solution. In my opinion, the solution is that the school department sign back over custody of that facility to the town of Wareham. At that point, we would have to go back to town meeting, because town meeting actually issues custody of these buildings to the school department. Then at that point, the board, through a vote of town meeting, could authorize the board to issue custody of that facility to, let's say, our CETA board, our CETA department. You say, well, why does that make a difference? Well, it makes a difference because now when you look at repairs and you look at especially emergency repairs that need to be made to that facility or will come up that need to be made to that facility, CETA has the ability to access funds, both state and from the federal government, that a school department cannot, as long as that property is under the custody of a school department. So I know that Mr. Pena has done a lot of work on this, so has the CETA board. I don't know why we keep running into this wall, but in its current form, and I have no hatred for the Boys and Girls Club, I support that organization, but this in its current state and process is flawed, seriously flawed. And, and I would hate to see you sign a lease with the Boys and Girls Club, and then 3 months from now, something serious happens to that property and we have to throw them out. Because the town, I don't believe we have a lot of extra money for capital needs to a building when we have a high school behind this building, we have a middle school behind this building, and we have a bunch of other school properties that are filled every day with kids. And I don't see how spending money here gets a book in a high school freshman's hands, or teaches an 8th grader about math or science, or the things that we all heard during the last budget cycle about how we're trying to educate our kids, and we're trying to educate our kids. And here we are, going to spend valuable dollars on a piece of property that I feel doesn't do any of those things. So for those reasons, I would urge the board to vote no and send it back to the school committee with a list of specific recommendations so that this can finally move forward in the right climate and on the right stage. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Selectman Whiteside.
Thank you. I disagree with my fellow selectmen. I support this lease with wholeheartedness, I guess. One of the things that is different about this lease is that it is a 10-year lease, and it can be a 10-year lease because this property is a surplus school building. That is the chapter of the law. It does not need to go to town meeting. It just needs to go through the school committee and then through us. I have read this a couple of times, and I remember your comments before, Mr. Holmes, and I appreciate your concern. But I also am aware that the Boys and Girls Club has a substantial groundswell of support throughout the town, and that there are many people who have already donated time, computers, and other goods and services, and that the club certainly was not able to take advantage of more grants that were available because it didn't have a permanent home. I'd like to remind you, and all of us who are here, that the previous home of the Boys and Girls Club was actually at one point a municipal maintenance garage. I know what's on the floor of my garage. I can hope that it isn't over there, even under a couple of layers of paint. It appears to me that the one thing that would make me a little nervous if I were going to be signing this as the Boys and Girls Club was that, yes, the town can in fact terminate this lease for, as Mr. Holmes stated, not being able to cover the repairs, the cost of the repairs for the 12-month preceding the issuance of the notice of a default. My sincere hope and belief is that the Boys and Girls Club has enough support from the community to be able to overcome any issues that would come before them. Now, am I going to sit here and say, well, this building is more important than the roof in the high school? No, because they're going to name the roof after me. You know that. That is a promise for Mr. Palladino. But you laugh, it's true. I believe that children need a safe and central location, and this building will in fact provide a safe and central location to students who may not otherwise have after-school facilities available to them. And for that reason, I'm in support of this lease agreement.
Thank you, Selectman Whiteside. Selectman Slavin.
Just what's written down, the numbers don't quite work well. I've gone back and forth on this quite a bit because it's a very difficult issue because, you know, it's hard to justify. But at the same time, I decided to think about it for the last couple of days and look at what the end result has to be. And the end result is the kids, the children. If I was doing this as an accountant, I'd probably say no. But in this particular case here, I'm going to say yes, simply because the kids in the town of Wareham, the children, have, as far as I'm concerned, have been shortchanged right along. There is issues with middle school. I'm not going to get into it, but you know, the kids in that school, we have some issues. We have issues where if we don't keep the kids occupied somehow and engage them, you lose them. And if you lose them in that particular age group, you've lost them forever. Those are children which later on in life can not only be productive, but they also could basically take care of the next 2 or 3 generations coming down the line. So in this particular case here, I think the actual value of the Boys and Girls Club outweighs any dollars. And I think it's time that we step up and support the children of the town of Wareham, which we have not done in a long time. Thank you.
Okay, I'm very mindful of the points that Selectman Holmes raised. In fact, we had a lengthy discussion about this the other day on Town Hall steps. If the board agrees to approve this lease and to execute it, that does not necessarily stop Mr. Pina's ardent desire to obtain this. Again, that is up solely to the school committee. It's their building at this point in time, use-wise. They make the determination under state law as to whether they wish to retain it or whether they wish to convey it back to the town for municipal purposes. Having heard that, but also being mindful of what Mr. Holmes does say about the possibility of Cedar obtaining the building and being able to make those repairs, I guess my point is one does not exclude the other. So an action tonight in favor of this lease does not necessarily mean that CETA or some other funding mechanism like community preservation, which seems to be the popular spot for people to go to today when they need a new roof, possibly from getting involved. Of course, now I'm writing a warrant article for next Springtown meeting, I'm afraid, and I probably don't want to do that. But in any event, I think that while Selectman Holmes' concerns are certainly valid, I do tend to fall with Mr. Slavin. If I were looking at this solely from dollars and cents, without the human interests involved, I too might question it. But I think the value to the youth of Wareham, to our community, to our culture, to the society we live in outweighs the possibility of a default here due to the building not being maintained. So with that in mind, is there anything else on this question, or are we prepared for a vote? Selectman Holmes?
I think it's important to clarify my statement because, again, maybe I spit out some in the end. My opinion has absolutely nothing to do with after-school programs for kids, having kids have things to do, none of that. I stated very clearly that I am a supporter of the Boys and Girls Club, and I'm not opposed to them being in that building. It has absolutely nothing to do with that. So to be clear for the record, what I have a problem with is we have an answer. I've given you an answer to take the burden of the finances away from the town of Wareham, and nobody wants to hear that. Well, that's okay. But remember, when those kids are marching down the sidewalk and they're being thrown out because we don't have the money to fix that building, unless, maybe the finance committee will come up with a bunch of money, or Mr. Sullivan has this money, I won't stand there and say I told you so because that's not the kind of guy I am, but I did warn you that was coming. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And so that's my whole point. It has nothing to do with the Boys and Girls Club. And I think it's sad that this issue has turned into that because this is, for the executive branch of government, this is a dollar and cent issue. I would tend to disagree with my fellow members. This is not about heartstrings. This is about our management of the town in trying to maintain some kind of fiscal responsibility. There's a way to do this without it costing the town, and I've offered that to you. But I don't want it to be perceived that, Steve Holmes doesn't want kids to have somewhere to go, because that's not true. I went out and found you an alternative, and I think it's a better alternative than this. But that's okay. We can agree to disagree on that point.
Well, thank you. I don't think anybody on this board thinks that you have it in for the Boys and Girls Club or anyone else, so I don't want that to be the impression left from the spirited debate we're having on this. There is one further point here, though, with regard to the lease language. On page 6, under paragraph 11, subleasing and assignment, I see that there is language in here relating to the rights of the lessee to sublease. But what I'm curious about is if we were to follow Selectman Holmes's path after executing this lease, is there anything, and I'm asking, directing this towards town council, is there anything in here that would permit the town to convey its interest in the building and for that assignment, if you will, of the property to remain binding upon the boys and the parties, the Boys and Girls Club in particular. And if not, how hard would it be to throw a sentence like that in?
Mr. Chairman, such a sentence would be a mere handful of keystrokes away. That being said, were the school committee to vote to transfer custody of the building pursuant to Chapter 40, Section 15A, were town meeting to transfer custody of the building to some other board like the Board of Selectmen or some other agency like CETA, the receiving body would, because of the existence of this lease, take the property subject to the lease. But that certainly can be with great ease specified.
What does the board feel about that? I think that would be a good addition, just to clarify so that in the future this question doesn't come up. It's already spelled out. Pardon?
Sorry, are you saying to add that language to page 6?
Well, I don't get
Section
to
11.
say that unilaterally. What does the board think?
Is it,
It's okay by me.
Selectman Whiteside?
it's okay by me. I'm not sure that it's necessary, but I'm not an attorney.
Okay. In that instance, why don't we wrap this up? May we have a motion to accept the lease as drafted with the additional language suggested by Attorney Bowen?
Motion so made.
It's not to accept, it's to execute.
Well, execution is implicit in the acceptance, but if you would prefer a motion to accept and execute.
I would.
I'll remove my
Okay,
So
Mr.
made.
Slavin's just withdrawn his first motion, and,
motion so made on the amended one.
Second.
okay, anything else on the question? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained, 3-1-0. It is done. And that concludes our brief portion of the meeting, and I guess we're ready to engage with the
It should be.
So with no further ado, I'll introduce Chairman Holmes and welcome the Finance Committee to this joint. Jeez. Hey, I just moved you over there. Good Lord. It's been a long day. Chairman McDonald of the Finance Committee, and
Thank you. We do not have a clerk tonight, so we'll open our meeting. It is 6:30 on September 24th with the joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen. The roll call is Mrs. Jordan, Mrs. Fons, Mr. Worthing, Mrs. Donahue, Mr. Hurd, and Mr. McDonald are here. Just want to say one more thing. Tonight, the meeting is an informative meeting for us. We're not going to deliberate. We're here to ask questions or to gather information. We won't be voting tonight. Thank you very much.
likewise. I asked Mr. Sullivan earlier today, and I hope this arrangement is good for you as well. What I was hoping was to take the articles up in the following order of category. The first would be the articles by the citizens petitioners, to get them out of here. Next would be the various town boards that have articles on here, or committees. Following that would be articles where they're put in at the request of town departments, but they are to be explained, if you will, by town employees, other than Mr. Sullivan in the last category, because Mr. Sullivan's got to stay around the whole time no matter what, are the articles to which he will speak. That way, if there is any carryover into tomorrow evening, which I hope we don't have, but if there is, hopefully it will just be Mr. Sullivan. We won't have to impose upon anyone else to come back a second night. So, do you have a list? He just gave you one? It's a miracle? Okay, well, with that in mind, if we're going off this order, why don't we ask Mr. David Fenton to come up to discuss his petition to change the zoning statutes to the 2002 statutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to address this. It's pretty simple. What they have now is your setbacks are 15 feet off the rear, 10 foot off the sides. Most of the lots in Wareham, or a majority of the lots in Wareham, I believe, are rather small, a third of an acre or less. And if you're going to build a 10 by 10 foot shed, the back of your shed is where you'd want the beginning of it. You know, if you went back to the '02 statutes where it's 5 foot off the back and 5 foot off the sides, it just makes more sense to a small lot. From 1956, when you had the first zoning bylaws that I could find, until 2002, they were all the same. And in '06, and I believe '06 they changed, then there was another year they changed because they're different. I couldn't find when they exactly changed, but that's what my proposal is.
Okay, well, thank you. Questions from anyone? Selectman Slavin.
Mr. Fenton, the reason for your petition is because you have a project that doesn't fit the current zoning laws?
I want to build a garage, correct, but this is an issue that many people have talked about and either haven't built sheds or they've gone and bought one and just put it in place, and I've just never gone and got permits to do it because it just wasn't going to fit their plan, so they just did it anyway. So.
Okay, so nobody has ever basically gone and used the ZBA in order to see if they can get a variance?
Well, it costs you $300 to get a variance, and you got to meet 4 criteria. If you do not meet that 4 criteria, which is pretty hard to do, you can't get the zoning variance.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Other questions for Mr. Fenton?
Mr. Fenton, is this the only change between the 2002 and the present zoning bylaws?
That I want to change, yes. It's just zoning bylaws for the setbacks, correct?
It says change the zoning bylaw back to 2002. I think you'd have to reword that petition
Okay.
in order to accommodate that.
I could do that. I could do that without a problem. I don't know if I'd have to start again.
The only issue with making changes, Mr. Fenton, is the warrant is closed.
Okay.
You may be able to, after you present your article at town meeting, make a motion to amend, but I fear that you may have run afoul of the rule that the scope of the amendment not be so broad as to change the article so much that people wouldn't have been properly warned, if you will, what the topic of the article was. I guess what we're looking at here is you've, and of course this, you know, it's easy for me to say I'm a lawyer. It's easy for Attorney Bowen to say he's a lawyer. It's easy for the planning board to say because they all do this stuff all the time. But you essentially what this is going to do is you set off a nuclear bomb to kill a gnat. With this article, you may be better served, I think, if your concern is setbacks, especially in certain zoning districts, to work with somebody knowledgeable in those areas and to come up with something for a subsequent town meeting that addresses just that problem. You'd have a better chance of passage, I think. In fact, I think you'd have a better chance of even getting that to a vote. But we appreciate your interest in this, and your attempt is valiant.
Well, I have a question. I can let this go as it is and try to pass it through, or what are my other options? We do this again.
Attorney Bowen can come up and speak to that question.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, members of the Finance Committee, Dave's got kind of a real problem with this one because, as has been pointed out, this went out, the public is on notice that every zoning bylaw post-2002 is going to be wiped out. And in a way, what Dave has done is, rather than making a fine-tuning adjustment, which I think is what he wanted to do, it was like adjusting it with a sledgehammer, which I know sometimes I'm guilty of when I'm fixing stuff. But my recommendation to Dave and the other signatories, because there's going to be a scope of the article issue that the moderator will have to deal with that fine-tuned motion, and whether the notice is good. My advice would be, if you weren't going to go through, that variance process or talk to the planning folks about that, and you wanted to bring it back in April, I would come in with a real targeted, precise change that would let you do what you want to do.
I'll let it go through the way it is then. Get
Okay.
it on the fall thing.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you. Yep.
your attempt. The next one up is a petition from Michael Flaherty. This is article number 26, to prohibit remote participation in public meetings. And I think we're probably going to want Attorney Bowen up here for this one as well. In fact, you might as well make yourself available, unless you want to get the exercise going back and forth.
Do you want me to just move up?
Yeah, I think that would.
How are you? It's not mine.
I like this arrangement.
Yeah, it's not too bad. So this one is canceling out the other one, right?
You can plug in down there or come back here.
I thought it was already canceled.
He's better off there or there?
Now it's to negate it. Negate it.
He's fine. He's fine there. He likes looking in this direction for some reason.
There's electrical plug in the floor.
There's a plug down there if you don't mind crawling under the desk. If you're going to need it, I don't know where your battery state is at this point.
I'll wait for Mike before I do my problem.
Okay. Good evening.
Good evening.
Why don't you tell us about your article?
It's very straightforward. It just, basically as the title says, it's to prohibit the remote participation at public meetings, and bring it back to the way it was for forever before the recent vote by the Selectmen. And I understand the Selectmen wanted to, help encourage participation, but I think that such a decision needs to go before a larger electorate, the public, to make that decision in this town.
Questions from the...
Not really a question, just more of a statement. I think that this is a selectman's policy, not something that came before town meeting. So therefore, I think the best venue to handle it from our standpoint would be to come to the selectmen with the petition, because I don't believe it has to go to town meeting floor. I'm not positive about that.
I could meet with the selectmen before a town meeting, but from what I understand, this can, and I haven't been told otherwise by the Attorney General, but there's no precedent, they told me, but they said that they'd review it after if it passes, but not before.
Selectman Slavin?
If I remember right, when Mr. Bowen basically gave the information out with the background from the state law, yours or mine, it specifically says that the Board of Selectmen can exercise this. It doesn't say it goes through town meeting, etc. So I question whether or not the town meeting can actually rule on this. Mr. Bowen.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, remote participation is a creation of the Attorney General's regulations. And the way the Attorney General has written the regulations is that a town may have remote participation by virtue of a Board of Selectmen vote. The Board of Selectmen vote covers all boards, committees, and commissions within town. And that Board of Selectmen vote authorizes, but does not require, all committees, boards, and commissions within town to avail themselves of remote participation. Nothing in the Attorney General's regulations references repeal of remote participation by bodies other than the Board of Selectmen. And in advisories from the Attorney General's office, the Attorney General has suggested the basic legal principle that the body creates is the body that has the power to destroy. Perhaps put a bit dramatically, but that's the way it works. The town meeting could not on its own adopt remote participation on behalf of any board, committee, commission in this town, and by extension of the same logic, and by absence of reference to town meeting in the Attorney General's regulations. It's my opinion that town meeting does not have the authority to adopt any bylaw, order, or regulation concerning remote participation. The Board of Selectmen, on petition, could repeal it, and that repeal would not be for selected boards, it would be for all boards. That's one way of handling a repeal. Another way of addressing it is that each board has its own discretion. Each board could adopt its own practice as to whether it wanted to do it. And finally, it's the chairman of each board who has the authority to assess whether a request to remotely participate is valid. And so each board chair has tremendous authority to decide whether it's appropriate. I talked to Mike a little bit about it. I certainly understand what the policy thinking is that Mike has here on this. I just believe that this particular mechanism won't work.
Just further to your point, were not the Attorney General's regulations issued in response to a provision in General Laws Chapter 39 that essentially said if there's going to be remote participation, then the AG has to come up with regulations for it?
Yes, that's exactly correct.
So in this case, what we're dealing with is a delegation by the legislature to the Attorney General of the ability to enable and regulate this practice. Is that not true?
Yes.
Well, I mean, I've arrived at a similar conclusion as Attorney Bowen. Again, now is not the time for the selectmen to explain why they voted to do this. This is your turn to explain why you think it should be taken away. So.
Yeah, and I understand the awkwardness of that. I don't mean it to be. It's just that public process is a public process, and a lot of the arguments used at the time were that private industry does this, and they do, but that's private industry where everything is proprietary and per se private. I respect your opinions, but I would like to take it as far as it'll go to the Attorney General, and I'd like to hear their opinion on it if it gets that far.
Okay, well, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Flaherty? Thank you for your participation.
Thank you.
Okay, now that takes care of the two petitioned articles. Next up, we have Article 3. This is from the board on the warrant at the request of the Board of Assessors to transfer funds for triennial revaluation and certification. Good evening.
Good evening.
I see we've got not one but two people to speak to this one.
Well, we don't want to be ganged up on, so.
So what is this? Tell us about it and why do you need it?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Every 3 years, the town is required to go through a triennial revaluation. And as part of that thing, there's more detailed paperwork and requirements by the state, Division of Local Services, and Department of Revenue that has to be fulfilled in that triennial inspection and revaluation. With that, there's usually extra work and extra documentation needed. And in the history of the town and the triennial revaluation, additional monies has been provided to make sure that we're in compliance with DOR and Division of Local Services. To do that, we have to come before town meeting for the vote for the raise and appropriate or transfer of funds, and that's what we're doing at this fall town meeting. This is for fiscal year 15, so to start that work, it needs to be started the first of the year of January 1st of 2014 to make sure that all the information is provided to the state in a timely manner to set our tax rate for that triennial revaluation. So that's what this article is for, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Director Miller, anything to add?
I do have, I don't know if you want it or not, it is the scope of what would be involved in the RFP that would be put out. And it kind of is the extra work that is the overlay to what a triennial involves, as opposed to what I do every year as an interim adjustment and certification for tax rate. Mr. Sullivan and I had an opportunity to invite down the chief of the Bureau, the new chief of the Bureau of Local Assessment, and also our local the field rep who will be doing our revaluation. And they did review our proposal and also suggested that we do engage in funding it in a way that we could do it as it's part of the process. One of the reasons, unfortunately, we have not been able to, and part of it is I thought I could run it without an assistant assessor, so we've been without an assistant assessor for 3 years since I got here. I'm almost here 3 years now. And also 2 people down on data collecting. So in order to accomplish this, there is a need for additional assistance in the office. You can ask questions, I think would be better, right, Derek?
Questions from the board or Selectman Holmes?
Good evening, thank you. It's funny you say that, 3 years.
Almost. I know.
Wow.
I know.
It's
Didn't
been,
think it was going to be 6 months.
It's been sweet as heaven, hasn't it?
You interviewed me.
Yeah, I remember that. And I think at the time, Steve was there too,
Yes.
for the interviews. And I don't know if Derek was there.
I
Were
was
you,
up
were you
there,
those?
yeah.
And I think at the time we were talking about a company called
We had Vision.
Vision?
Who did the
Vision.
Who did the assessment? Vision.
Vision, yeah.
Were you contemplating this year bringing that company back, the same company?
For this reval,
Yes.
we will put it,
Well, I know you have.
we'll put it out to them because
understand.
they're our vendor. I think that we need to put it out to some other vendors as well.
Right.
Particularly the commercial aspect of it. I didn't feel, as I worked with the vendor during the prior reval, that we got the attention that I think we deserve from a vendor. And there are some other vendors out there who have more
Sure.
people working just in commercial, so.
Sure. So yeah, I understand that you have
You
to
know,
do that.
yeah,
There are
I'm sorry.
procurement laws we have
Yeah.
to. But and my second question is, I seem to recall a number in my head of 59,000.
150,000.
So I knew it was close, right? It was in the
Yeah,
50s.
you're there.
Now, what are you looking at? What are you thinking of that this number is going to be? Because in my copy, it only says the sum. We don't have a number in there
Yeah.
yet.
Well, we have not put out the RFP, but what I have done is rough justice estimates based on some phone calls, some research, having been in the revaluation business myself. And if we farm out or hire out, it'll be close to the $100,000 range.
So you think that by having 3 years of operations, you in charge there, that we've saved 59,000 if you get it for 100?
Well, I think even with, depending on what type of an assistant would have been hired.
That was a
No, wait
compliment, by the
wait a
way.
minute.
That was
What's
a
he
good thing,
talking
by the
about?
way. You could have just said yes.
Oh, okay, yes.
That was a grand slam even for little Devin. You could have hit that one over the fence.
We can recapture more by having additional hands on deck.
Sure.
that
No,
we
I'm
would
not. No, I'm not
have.
questioning the need because I
No.
understand how important it is.
No,
I was
I
just
would
trying to
like
get,
to have done it.
trying to make a comparison from 3 years from last time to this time. Because
I think
typically
it's
we don't
gonna
go
be
out. We
To
weren't
answer
going
your
out
que-
at all.
To
right?
answer your question, Mr. Holmes, at that time, we did not have a director or an assistant.
Right.
So the reval company had to do basically 95% of all the work.
Right.
By having the director and the personnel, we'll definitely be having a savings of over 35% from last time.
That's where I was going with the answer. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Other questions?
Thank you. I just want to confirm that this is just for FY 2014, even though the reval. Well, no. the
No, this
year
is for
the 15, but you're
triennial of
looking-
2015.
But you're looking for the money for FY 14.
You can actually spread the money off of 2 fiscal years on this
Okay.
one. What we're doing is we have the receipts reserved for appropriation sale of real estate account. Inside that account, we have $81,599. What that account is when we have properties that we've taken either through tax title and such, or we sell them, the funds go into that account. This is one of the purposes that you can use it for. The other amount is we do have a line item for an assistant assessor, but it was only part-time with the cuts we've made. So I'd like to transfer that money over as well, so we'd have a total amount of $104,413.01. So $81,599 from the sale of real estate, $22,814.01 from the part-time assistant assessor salary line.
So you anticipated my next question, which was where are we getting it from? Thank you very much.
Other questions?
So you're looking, sorry, so you're looking to get it all this year. If you're saying it's going to be $100,000, we're going to get and put the money.
I would think, what I have to thinking about an RFP is I would have a range of 100 to 120 at the max. I'm hoping that we're well within range at the 104. So if we need more funds, we can fund it in FY15. This
Okay.
will cover our needs for FY14.
So the amount is basically $104,000 for the article that's in here, correct?
Correct.
All right, that's what I needed. Thank you.
Other questions for Chairman Curry or Director Miller?
Nice work.
Director.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Appreciate your succinct explanation.
Did you hear this? Thank you. It's good to see you all.
Next up, we have Article 17. This is from the Historical Commission. It's a bylaw revision, preservation of historically significant buildings, demolition delay. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Wareham Historical Commission Chair, Angela Dunham.
Tell us about your article, please.
Okay. Shall I read it?
No, you don't need to, just Cliff Notes version.
Okay. We enacted this demolition delay bylaw February 25th, 2010. It was approved, by the Attorney General on that date. At that time, we had brought forth a demo delay bylaw after having reviewed several communities' bylaws, demo delay bylaws as a model. And we tailored it to what we felt was Wareham's needs. And we have had many demo delay bylaw hearings. The benchmark was 50 years in the original demo delay bylaw. We'd like to change it to 75. I know myself that I built a house 40 years ago, and I don't consider my house to be historical by any stretch of the imagination. So we've changed it to 75 years to move forward in a more efficient way and to allow us to address issues that the Wareham Historical Commission needs to address. So every time that we have a reference to 50 years, we'd like it changed to 75.
Okay, thank you for that quick explanation.
In your review of other communities, what was the longest period?
I don't remember. I'm sorry.
Was there 100 year?
Yes.
Thank you.
Where'd that come from? Yeah?
Other questions? Selectman Slavin, then Selectman Holmes.
Included in the demo law, there's also a clarification of the Historical District Commission.
Yes, there is. Thank you.
With the district, which basically has control of anything in that district, they're the ones that actually will be issuing a certificate of appropriateness in order for the demo to happen,
Yes.
correct?
The addition to that, thank you. It says...
You're welcome.
Any property requesting demolition that lies within the Wareham Historical Districts shall apply to the Wareham Historical District Commission for a determination and certificate of appropriateness. The Wareham Historical Commission, as regards to these properties, has no jurisdiction and does not issue demolition permits for these said properties. We have two historical districts. We have the Narrows Historical District down by British Landing, Bessie Park, and the other is down the other end of Main Street where the Wareham Old Town offices sits, the WCTV building in that area. That's the Parker Mills Center Park Historical District. So they hold the right for demolition discussion.
Just for an explanation, this was done because we have the property on Lower Main Street that was just recently demoed. Everybody knows about the old Greer Lumberyard. There was a problem because the way that we had passed the demo law, the Historical Commission actually has to issue a demo permit, but then the Historical District Commission also has a piece involved, so it became so convoluted that it delayed the whole process by 3 or 4 months. So this basically eliminates that issue coming again.
Both the Wareham Historical District Commission and the Wareham Historical Commission had joined together and agreed to hold joint meetings. But you're right, this will make it a much more efficient process.
Thank you. Selectman Holmes?
Yeah, I just, like I'm following around with Thomas thinking, you said that your home was 50 years old, right? Or close
40.
to that. And, you know, I'm thinking that mine is pretty close to that, 75 now. And I was wondering what the difference of 25 years really makes and whether or not you thought that maybe it should be 100 years old. I mean, is there really that big a difference? In other words, from point A to point B, where does the 25 years get you in terms of numbers? We have a lot of older homes here. Should it be higher, do you think?
I agree that that is a, you know,
In other words, so next year we don't come back
consideration.
and say, okay, we want to go from 75 to 100. I mean, shouldn't it just be 100, or is that an issue?
I'd have to discuss it with my commission. This is what we had agreed upon, but I certainly agree with what you're saying. It was my former home, not my present home, that was built 40 years ago, but nonetheless,
Right.
I agree with you that
No, I'm just...
that may come up again down
just
the road.
thinking out loud.
Selectman Slavin?
In reference to Mr. Holmes's question, to the moderator, going from 75 to 100 years, will that take the article out of the scope?
It probably would be within the scope. Generally, it's money articles or something that would change substantially the subject of the article, but
Okay. So, Mr. Holmes, if you want to, that could be modified on the floor.
Historical Commission is going to have a meeting next week. I'll put it on the agenda to make that amendment.
Does 25 years really make that much of a difference? Should we just make it 100?
You're right.
Whatever that number is.
I'll put it on the agenda for discussion. Thank you.
Mr. Hurd?
Yes, one question. Would it be wiser at this point to put a date in rather than have it 75 years? Because 25 years from now, the house that's 50 years old is going to be subject to the Historical Commission regulations. Would it be better just to put a date in, say 100 years back, 1913, if that's what you're looking at?
That's an interesting idea. Make a date.
To include that in the amendment, to include the date of this request? Am I understanding you properly?
No, I'm saying
No.
put in, if you're looking to declare a historical building that's 100 years old, at this time, why not put in 1913, prior to 1913? That way you've established a demarcation point. Unless you're expecting that in 25 years, a house that was built in 1950 is going to be historic.
Thank you. I will put that on the agenda for discussion with the commission, and I agree. That would make sense, of course.
Any other questions? Thank you for coming forward with this and entertaining the anticipated amended motions.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Article 13. This is here at the request of the school committee, and it's for the feasibility study high school roof. The white side roof.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr.
How are you,
Chair.
Madam Chairman?
Fine, thank you. Thank you for having us here tonight. The article before you is to ask for money to be raised or appropriated, transfer or borrowed for a feasibility study for the other portion of the roof, the rest of the roof. As you know, we had an article in front of town meeting to replace the high school gymnasium roof, which did pass, and we were able to do that. This is the rest of the roof. So one of the questions is just a partial roof. It is the rest of the roof. So again, this is just for the feasibility study. We are going, and we have been approved by the state that if this is approved, then they will then reimburse us for the full roof after the feasibility study. We're thinking upwards around 68%. So we would be coming back to you for the amount to be able to replace the whole entire roof. We know that a dollar amount has to go into this article before it's voted on. From what I understand, we're thinking the feasibility study will be around $60,000, but we're going to get that number firm before this article actually goes in front of town meeting.
Questions?
If I may, excuse me, so you're saying that the state requires a feasibility study before they would agree to reimburse us 68%?
Exactly. And that's the program that they go through. And so this is the same thing that we went in front of. We actually went to town for a vote for the rebuild of Minot. We got approved by the state that they would then reimburse us for rebuilding or updating Minot. But we first had to pay for a feasibility study that I think was around $500,000. Unfortunately, that failed. And we weren't able to go forward, and now we're back at the bottom of the list when it comes to the work that seriously needs to be done on Minot. But that was then. This is another school. We are having significant issues with the high school roof at the high school, and this is what we're asking for.
Other questions?
Thank you.
Just
yes.
a brief one. I know that the Minot study did not pass, and my biggest fear is that if this runs into the same logjam that it ran into, then we're going to go way back on the list, and they may never consider us again at the state level. So that would be my only comment, because I don't think we can continue to. I mean, 68% is a very good reimbursement for something like that. Mm-hmm. So while it's the same thing was going to happen, I understand that $500,000 was a substantial amount of money, but we need to repair these buildings. So
Agreed.
Selectman Slavin, and we'll bounce back and forth.
That's okay. The one question I would have would be, when we go past the first piece and into the second, are we going to be looking for a borrow from the town, or are we going to be looking for a debt exclusion? How are we going to do that?
That would be something that we would determine when we receive the amount.
Okay, what would the approximate price be to the town?
Approximately $1 million.
Million for the whole project? Mm-hmm. So we'd be looking at somewhere between $300,000 and $350,000 from the town?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
Marilyn?
you. I'm going to be naive and ask the question, not to be inflammatory, but maybe to get educated. What do you get for $68,000? That's a lot of money for a study.
You want to go into the details?
Sure.
Great, thanks.
What happens with MSBA, the Massachusetts School Building Authority, they have certain parameters set out that we have to follow to come into the program. The first one was to apply, which we did. We were accepted. The next stage is looking at the study. We will be assigned an architect. We'll be assigned a project manager. Those two people will work together. We'll survey the roof, look at what needs to be brought up to code. We'll look at the type of roof, and then we'll put together the drawings and the proposal to go out to bid. Unfortunately, the MSBA is very particular about how they allow these projects to move forward, and we have guidelines to follow. One would think that we could just come up, find our own project manager and architect, submit it. We would not qualify, and we would be bumped out.
And just to add on to that, and what we would do in the article is say, once the amount is in there, up to, and so if we were able to come under, we would.
Okay, so effectively for 68,000, you're getting plans and specs, and you're being assured that you're within the guidelines for reimbursement.
Yes.
Thank you.
All along the way, there are check-ins, so at the 25% mark, we submit. At the 50% mark, we submit, and then at the 75 or 80% mark, it's resubmitted to MSBA to make sure that we're following everything we need to follow.
Selectman Whiteside and then Selectman Holmes.
Thank you. It seems to me that the issue of a prior study may not have been roundly discussed and by bodies who really were trying to work together. How was that? I think that the way the school committee, the finance committee, and the Board of Selectmen are working together, and since, I don't know, March, April, something like that, is a big difference. I guarantee you that roof leaks. It leaked on me. There is an issue. It's a very valid issue, and that is, where's the non-reimbursable money going to come from? And that is something that we are going to have to work together to come up with. It may be that in some of the discussions that Mr. Sullivan has with Ms. Shaverhood, the savings in terms of consolidating personnel, that kind of thing. We cannot continue to not take care of our fixed assets. We can't.
Selectman Holmes.
Yeah, I guess my question goes to Mr. Sullivan, and the real important question is, where is the 68,000 going to come from?
And I'm sorry, it's 60, but.
Whatever, 60, 68. Where's the money going to come from, sir?
My understanding is the LEA budget, or the school budget, should I say, or am I incorrect?
We would be looking to examine our budget as well as town budget to come up with the money.
So the answer is we don't have an answer for that question yet.
We would probably have to bring it back in the spring to make the transfers from whatever the town side would be to be able to fund it.
I just want to be clear that we don't have the funds sitting there at this point, and they still have to be assigned.
I don't have a location, no.
I'm sorry?
I don't have a place, so.
So when this comes up in 3 weeks, you're going to have to tell people that you still don't have a location, or maybe by then you'll find some money for this, right? We don't want people thinking they're voting on something that you've already set the money aside for, or maybe you've set the money aside for. So I think between the two of you, that's an important answer. On town meeting floor, it'll be a no if you don't have the money put aside. So, just a little fair warning.
Any other questions for the school committee and the superintendent? Okay, I guess that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
for your
very
time.
much. Thank you.
Enjoy.
Okay, the next one is community preservation. They've got the next three. We'll start off with Article number 8. This is the Nature Explore Outdoor Classroom / Play Area.
Angela Dunham, Chair of Wareham CPC.
Now, just for reference, I believe Chairman McDonald, they've already been before you to explain this. They've already come before us.
Is that me?
Yeah, we're trying to figure out which one's feeding back here. It's if I go like this, is that better? Okay. CPC's already. What's not feeding back? It's not on. CPC's already been before both bodies and has had offered them a chance to ask questions. But perhaps while you're here, for the viewing audience, you could just briefly recapitulate what this is about, and we'll see if there's any further questions.
I will. The Wareham Free Library has brought forth this article for Nature Explore Outdoor Classroom / Play Area. The idea behind this is that children today are spending a great deal of time in front of the TV sets, playing video games, internet, texting, whatever it happens to be. We're trying to encourage children to get outdoors to learn about the world around them. This is a collaborative project of the Arbor Day Foundation and Dimensions Educational Research Foundation. There is a large-scale model already built over at the Heritage Plantation in Sandwich. This project being brought forward with this article is to create a concept plan. It is not for the actual building of a Nature Explore Outdoor Classroom. It's only for the concept plan. I know a lot of people ask, as we just did go over, why are we spending this money on a project? It is to make sure that everything has been done appropriately to the project so that there isn't any question later on of costs being included that should not have been. So anything that's not expended in a CPC project is brought back in. We give an outside figure to make sure that we don't have to go back to town meeting and say that we made a mistake in the estimates. Monies are brought back in that aren't expended.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Any additional questions, or was everybody satisfied from the last appearance? Yes.
Thank you. I just have one question with regard to the, we're going to talk about the roof, the multi-service center, or we're going to start that?
We're not, yeah, we're just taking them up one at a time. Okay, I guess we can move on to the next one, which is Article number 10. This is the multi-service center roof restoration.
I'm asking Mr. Menard, Municipal Maintenance Director, to step forward, please.
Which he has. Good evening.
Thank you.
Good evening.
We've heard about this. The FinCom, I believe, has already heard about this. Are there any further questions for Director Menard or for Community Preservation? Yes.
Thank you. And my question actually goes to Angie. With regard to, there was some talk about whether there was going to be required to have a historical preservation restriction put on that, and you thought that maybe we didn't. Do we need to amend the motion before it comes
We may.
out?
We may do that. On Thursday evening, I'll have another opportunity again to ask. I've already contacted the Community Preservation Coalition. The person I spoke to, who is the assistant director, said no. But tomorrow I will, not tomorrow, I'm sorry, Thursday night I will ask again to double check to make sure. I have information here that I can read right to you from Community Preservation information that asks, are preservation restrictions required by CPA? And I can quote that to you. The Community Preservation Act specifically calls for perpetual preservation restrictions established under Chapter 8, 184 of Mass General Laws whenever CPA funds are used to purchase a real property interest. Therefore, when purchasing or buying an interest in a historic property, a preservation restriction is required. The act is not specific as to whether a preservation restriction is required when CPA money is expended on a historic preservation project. Many towns have chosen to require a preservation restriction when any amount of CPA funds are awarded for rehabilitation or restoration of a historic property. This protects the town's investment should the property change hands or become subject to additional development pressures. Cape Cod Commission staff recommended that a preservation restriction be required whenever CPA funds are used to rehabilitate or restore historic properties, regardless of the property ownership, for example. So apparently it is subjective to the CPC locally.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Selectman Slavin?
Sorry. I believe what we had heard was originally this was going to be an emergency through Mr. Menard, but I believe the Finance Committee was told at that time there would also be air conditioning units involved with this repair, which we didn't hear about. My question first is, how much is the dollar amount for the air conditioning units?
Do you have those? Do you have those figures? I don't have that with me.
I believe the
20
roof units were $18,000.
Total?
Total, yeah.
Including installation?
Including installation,
Okay,
yes.
they'll probably fall under the capital planning committee, but the roof itself, even though this is an emergency, it still should go through capital planning because it's not on their 5-year plan at all, either item. Not required by charter, obviously, to go to town meeting, but normally the capital planning committee would make a recommendation on any capital item.
Do you want me to make arrangements to appear before the capital planning? Is that what your recommendation is today?
Yeah, because like I say, it's not in their plan at all.
Okay, so Mr. Menard and I would be then appearing before capital planning?
Yeah, that would.
Or just CPC?
Well, it's coming through CPC. Probably Mr. Menard come with you.
As well.
I don't have an issue with it. I just have the idea that the loose end should be tied.
I did call Community Preservation Coalition and ask whether the air conditioning units could be included, and I was told yes.
I already
because
heard
it's vital
that. I'm not questioning that.
Okay, thank you. I'll make those arrangements.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Selectman Holmes?
What is the total cost of this?
I have $110,000,
I'm
Mr.
sorry?
Holmes. $110,000?
No, that's the cost of this, this article. What is the total cost of this project?
That's the 110,000. That's the project manager. That's for everything. The
What
roof
about
being
these air
completed.
conditioners
Everything is
Mr.
in-
Slavin is talking about?
It's complete,
It's in this money, Mr. Slavin.
yes.
Alan, you there?
Yeah, it was. It was never broken out before. I had no idea we had air conditioners in the project.
So air conditioners are an emergency, I take it.
I guess
I've been kind of stressed out a little bit over the. I don't have an issue with fixing something that we need to have fixed. What I have an issue with sometimes is the mechanism by which we do that. To me, an emergency is the situation we had 2 summers ago down in Onset. Mr. Campino was here. He can vouch for what I'm telling you, where the pipe broke along the Onset Bridge, and if we didn't fix it right away, sewerage would be running into the bay. That's an emergency. This has been kicked around the horn here for, what, 3 or 4 months now? At least.
Mr. Holmes, the...
It's not an emergency to me. Emergency is, there's water coming through the roof. We just redecorated these floors here, new carpeting, new offices. We've moved people around. And why would we do that if there's an emergency repair that needs to be done?
I'd like to answer that if you don't mind.
I'd like to hear the answer. Well, not just me.
Yeah.
But a lot of people would like to hear that answer. To understand how you come up with an emergency and then don't fix it for 4 months because you're waiting for a town meeting. So I'd like to hear that explanation. Thanks.
Well, first, I'm just an interim, so I just started, obviously, July 1st, doing this
You
position.
raised your hand to answer the question, young
Yeah,
man.
I did. And the second is that we did all the rugs and everything. It's on a different part of the roof. This is the back side of the second floor, which is the concern, which it become an emergency when I got a call at 8:30 a night, not too long ago, and it's actually leaking through the light fixtures, water. So, I mean, I would say that's pretty considerable emergency to me.
And I'm not questioning whether you're telling the truth when you say it's an emergency. My issue is, if it's an emergency, we get it fixed. That's my issue.
Well, in the
And
past,
why wait? Why wait for months when you know there's damage being done? You know, you try to stop that damage.
yes, we have been trying to stop it. That's why we're trying
You know,
to
you're
repair.
hemorrhaging, right? You don't get to the ER and the doctor says, oh, just let him bleed till we get a tourniquet. They kind of put a tourniquet or something on you to stop the bleeding, right? Because now, the longer you wait, the more water gets in there, the more damage gets done, the more it costs, right?
Yes.
That's
Mr.
your
Menard,
profession.
Mr. Menard, if I may, the simple answer is he doesn't have the funds, and we will not let him expend funds that he does not have.
I can add a little bit to this.
the question was back to an emergency. What would you do in an emergency?
We've stopped where the initial leak is. What he was talking about actually was at a finance committee meeting. I was in front of the finance committee, and water started leaking out of the light onto my head, which was serendipitous in a way. So, but we don't have we can do a little stopgap, but we don't have the funds, and it's going to keep on getting worse and worse, and that's what we're really trying to stop. But we don't have the funds to make the proper repairs, and we're trying to do what's right to maintain our buildings.
This was brought forth, sorry.
So this would give us a new
Microphone, please.
For that portion, the total job, Mr. Menard, if you wouldn't mind explaining what it will do so that everybody can hear.
Yes, that's going to be a total roof reconstruction. That's insulation, flashing, 30-year membrane, all complete.
Could you explain why we need to replace the air conditioners?
Well, they're all rusted out, and that's why they've gotten multiple repairs on them too. So we're going to be replacing the whole roof. It doesn't make no sense to leave them rusted up AC units on top there at this time.
So we would put a new roof on in 3 or 4 years, tear it up to put new air conditioning units in?
Yeah, that's possible, yeah.
Fair enough. That explanation certainly makes sense with the magical appearance of the air conditioners. Just briefly to...
Yeah, so if I may.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your responses, and that's what I was looking for, was some kind of an explanation. Absent none, this is some big emergency, and we didn't replace it. So for $110,000, I mean, the townspeople know they're going to get a new roof on the multi-service center and include air conditioners at the same time, and then they know that they don't have to worry about this building. It's
That's
not
correct.
just about the area that was leaking on my brother's head, right? It's the entire roof, correct?
This brother.
Correct? This brother, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
All right, thank you.
I can tell you that the word emergency was put in there from CPC because our deadline was the second Tuesday of June, and this was not for applications. This was not brought to our attention until after that deadline date. Therefore, it went forth under that category of emergency application. That's where that word came from, Mr. Holmes.
So, I just wanted to
Okay.
have a good explanation.
Just to tell you.
Anything else?
Just to be clear, everything that's in here as far as the cost, and which I know Mr. Menard and I had discussion, these are all just quoted from one person, so obviously afterwards it would go out to bid and it may come in less or whatever. But what I really want to say is this is unique because CPC money is being used to do this, and I would guess with the air conditioners it's not possible to do that, but I guess it is based on some of the correspondence we've had as well. And we did take bets on how long he would last with the leak, just for the just for the record. But and we don't have the money in the town, so now we have an ability to repair a roof, and we do need the air conditioners come summertime. And we're while it's still tax dollars per se, it's not going to hurt our budget.
To replace it. Not a repair.
Yeah, I mean,
Restore.
this is community preservation money. Let's not make any mistake here. This is not free money. This is all money that the taxpayers pay in as a 3% surtax on their property tax, with a little bit of a kiss from the state. The state's kiss is not as big as it used to be, as I understand it. But nonetheless, it is the taxpayers' money at use here. It's not free money. That notwithstanding, it doesn't impact the operational budget of the town if it comes through this way. So thank you for that clarification. It was very helpful. Anything else for Mr. Menard and CPC on this article?
It
Okay.
comes under historic preservation because the building was built in 1909.
Well, with this in mind and all the leaking roofs we seem to have and a high school roof, maybe we should go back to your historical commission article and decide that anything under over 20 years of age is historic, and maybe we can start using the money to fix the high school. Okay, the next item on the list is Article number 9. This is to return funds from completed projects.
Do you
Housekeeping article?
Do you really want to do that now? You have a 7:30 hearing, so do you want us to bow out until your hearing's over?
Yeah, why don't we do that?
We'll just recess till then.
Thanks for watching the clock. Well, watching my back, so to speak.
9 is a quick.
It's a
All right, if
housekeeping article.
That's okay. If it's not going to take long. This is just a housekeeping article, right?
It is. These are amounts of money that have been certified by Judy Luzon, Town Accountant. I have an email here certifying that the balances agree with CPC figures. These are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 figures that are coming back into CPC. They were not expended after the projects were completed.
Any questions from anyone here? All set? Okay. Now you're free to go. Thank you very much for your time tonight. We appreciate it. Yep. With that in mind, we'll wait a minute and let everybody get organized here for our 7:30 hearing.
They would go to Peter. Peter would announce that he received it.
I think we can deal with this one fairly quickly. I understand that we're missing an attorney here, and that the applicant here would appreciate a continuance. That's correct. I would be inclined to grant that, but it's got to be by motion of the board. Again, I want to. It's difficult for you to pinch hit, I suppose. So, there you go. I'm inclined to grant that courtesy if the board approves. Could we have a motion on that?
I move that the hearing be postponed for 2 weeks, or continued. Is it a continuance?
Yes.
It's a continued for 2 weeks from today.
Fair enough. Just Officer Lieutenant Walczak, just so you understand what happened here, their lawyer has gotten hung up in court. Given the nature of the record here, what's happened, the complexity of the matter, and being a fellow attorney myself, I'm sympathetic to the applicant's desire to have counsel to represent them here. And so what we have just done is move to continue it for 2 more weeks, at which time we will take it up. Now, were you also here tonight, Lieutenant Walczak, on the fingerprint? You're not looking too certain over there. I'm not familiar with the fingerprint. Oh, this is the article from you guys to adopt a bylaw for the civil fingerprinting of vendors. So I guess we can't hold you any longer. Have a good evening. We'll see you in a couple of weeks back here. Appreciate it.
Okay, so we'll put that in the record. Put it in the
Just to make a notice on the record, the hearing has been continued to October 8th. Let's make sure we get counsel here for that one, because I don't know that the board's going to be interested in a further continuance. So, thank you. We're going to take a 5-minute break here and come back and continue on with the FinCom on the warrant articles. Thank you. Okay, we're back at it here. Up next, we've gotten through CPC. We have Article number 20. This is the request of the Planning Board, transfer of development rights. Yeah, you. Before we jump into this one, I'd like to take a moment and thank both Selectmen Slavin and Selectman Whiteside for jumping into the breach of a lack of a town planner to see this work through, both for the transfer of development rights article, the medical marijuana treatment center article, and also the signed bylaw article that are going to appear on the town meeting warrants. They put in an awful lot of work. They met frequently with the planning board. They met frequently with other parties to be able to bring this to town meeting, and I'm very proud to serve with people who work so hard on such lengthy and difficult tasks. Having said that, good evening, Chairman Barrett.
Good evening.
Why don't you tell us about the transfer of development rights article?
I heard that so much I thought everybody knew all about it. Anyway,
we're looking for the Cliff Notes version here for these things
just
tonight,
as the
I
name
think.
implies, it's a transfer of development rights from one parcel of property to another. In the interest of conservation of land and not having to build and maintain large expanses of infrastructure to cover basically the same amount of housing. This has been in the works since, I think, 2005 or 2006 in various renditions. It's been a work in progress all these years. It still is to a degree. We're fine-tuning. We'll be going to a public hearing next month to let the public take a crack at it and hopefully have a project everybody can live with at town meeting.
Well, thank you. I'll start with Chairman McDonald and then bounce to Selectman Slavin.
Good evening. The public hearing is going to occur before town meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Unfortunately, with advertising and things of that nature, we're always stuck in that predicament where you have a public hearing at a point in time where it's too late to change anything before you go to town meeting.
Selectman Slavin. I know, old and slow.
Just as a point of reference, again, we've been working on this particular article for quite a while. It's a very convoluted and complex article, and of course, I never make things easy. I've probably overthought this quite a bit. The actual package from Attorney Witten, which is basically Mr. Bowen's partner for the town of Wareham, basically is about 17 pages. We just got this at about 2 o'clock today. We were supposed to get it yesterday in the afternoon, so the planning board, which met last night, could go over and look at it. We also have a cover sheet in which Attorney Witten says, my general comment is the bylaw seeks to do too much, which is not unusual for me. And he thinks it should be less cumbersome. He's made a bunch of suggestions. I believe the planning board is going to be meeting on Monday of this coming Monday at 7 o'clock. Attorney Witten will go ahead once he gets an okay from the planning board, which hopefully is tomorrow, to go ahead and simplify the article, because he explains how it can be done and why. And we should have hopefully something obviously for the public hearing, and hopefully we'll have something back to everybody sometime next week. I've given everybody a copy, and I don't expect anybody to have any comments because you just got it, which I apologize, but we're doing the best we can to try and get this done.
Yes, and again, to the the last-minute nature of some of this, please understand that they are doing this without the benefit of a town planner, who is typically the one who obtains outside help in many instances to get this done, and in the absence of that, usually throws themselves into the breach to get the work done. These people have essentially stepped up and taken over that role, and so that's why things are perhaps a little bit later in the process than might be normal. But at this point, if there are any questions from people, Selectman Slavin?
Just also, We have to also thank Serped and Sandy Connie from Serped, who's been working on it, was under the impression we weren't going to do this till next year. And that's what when they were contracted, Serped provides the town with so many hours of service for 2 different parts of the town. And this was going to be our service for the particular planning board side. Unfortunately, the information she received was not correct time-wise, so she's been going out of her way to try and help us as well. So this information goes from the planning board to Serped to John Whitten and back. So that's some of the reason for time. We have to go through 3 different entities and keep making changes as we go.
I do have one question, if it's possible to answer that at this time. What zoning districts will be classified as receiving parcels under this proposed legislation?
If you look at Attorney Whitten's notes about simplifying, he was talking about eliminating 570-8, I think, which was the design section. It was also changing some of the receiving areas too.
Yeah, we kind of agreed to put the design standards and things along those lines into rules and regs to make them adjustable and not have it as part of the bylaw. As far as the receiving parcels, is that what you asked?
Yes.
We weren't leaning towards specific districts. We were looking for areas that may contain more than one district. If you cite an area, just one from memory.
Bottom of page 2 and on 3.
Like Toby Road was one area that was suggested. The East Wareham Village area, Tyhonet Village, the commercial strip along Cranberry Highway in East Wareham was another area we discussed.
I can read from the actual latest version here. One of them was Tyhonet Village, Parker Mills, Toby Road, East Wareham, receiving area, which they call Type 2, was Commercial General, Commercial Strip, Wareham Village 1, Wareham Village 2.
I'm going to go back a year in time when we met with the planning board in November of 2012. And at that time, I do believe there was a general consensus amongst the selectmen and the planning board that Onset Village might be benefited as well by being included in this. So to the extent that you're either going to list them or not going to list them, as the case may be, as per council's recommendation, if they are going to be listed, that might be something to consider as well, because I do believe there was consensus among the bodies at that time to include Onset in that. Other than that, are there any other questions, or do we want to wait and see what we get? Okay, fair enough. I guess we'll move on. The next one is Article 21. This is the floodplain overlay district article, also inserted at the request of the planning board. Why don't you give us the cliff notes on this one?
Well, if you remember a couple of years ago, excuse me, FEMA kind of descended upon us with all these new maps and changes and the promise of accuracy and ease and learning from past experience. And
yeah,
we found out that that might have been a slight exaggeration. And what these map changes, I believe, represent is the corrections made since then.
By whom would the corrections have been made?
This is, well, FEMA and their subcontractors. And
did the planning board have any guidance to offer them in this project, being probably much more familiar with the town of Wareham than a federal agency?
I'm afraid not. By the time we received this information, the comment period had already lapsed, so.
Shocking. Attorney Bowen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Chairman. My understanding of the process was that Mr. Iafredi received comments directly from FEMA saying, this is how you've got to amend your map.
Yeah,
or you're going to have a big insurance problem. So the article was pretty much written by FEMA. I think I added the words, to see if the town will vote, and ended it with the words, or take any other action relative thereto. So this is a straight FEMA product.
I see. So in other words, what we're looking at here is the ability to map out that which people may not be able to afford any longer with the adjustments to FEMA's insurance.
Yeah, the changes to our zoning bylaw were done back with the first map changes, so this is merely updating the maps.
Okay,
And
fair enough.
referencing these instead of the old ones.
Selectman Slavin and then Mr. Worthen.
The maps that are with us now, there's no guarantee that there won't be a change again, unfortunately. I believe it was Mrs. Waters was one of the two people who actually penned the bill, and I have some issues personally as far as the whole idea of a bill to fund insurance, but really to fund another large government agency that keeps growing on top of itself. I'm sure if I vote no at town meeting, it's a symbolic vote because the government's going to do what the government's going to do. But the bottom line is they basically put people on October 1st as their insurance comes due if they have a mortgage where they have to have flood insurance at a situation where some of them can't afford the insurance. We have businesses in the town of Wareham, which, and I don't mean to make a speech out of this, but to me it's very important, that are sitting on the water. I know some new restaurants that have opened recently and other places that have been a long time. They might be paying as much as $8,000 to $10,000 right now for flood insurance. Their new flood insurance policies might be $30,000 to $40,000 or more. This whole thing that was done with not a lot of thought of what the end result would be. They looked at the short term of getting extra funds, not at the long term of what the cost is to the individual that's involved with this. And I don't think Wareham, obviously if Wareham votes no, we stand at the risk of obviously FEMA saying we're not going to cover any insurance and dropping everybody's policies. But the bottom line is someone needs to make a call to our federal government and as a wake-up call. This is something that is really affecting people's lives because come October 1st, whether they repeal the bill 6 months or a year from now, you got to pay now. So I have a problem with all of it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't even know why they put this up for a vote because you can't vote it down. It'll affect people's ability to get flood insurance and financing in that case. You're having a gun held to your head. There's not much you can do about it at this point other than complain to your legislators.
Okay, Mr. Worthen and then
I was just
Mrs. Donahue.
I just want to know what would happen if you voted no. And the other is the impact on property valuation. As a result of us now sleeping with life jackets.
What we were told at the first go-around was if we didn't accept their maps, it would affect people's ability to get flood insurance. And
We'll take that line again.
I don't know why this would be any different.
Thank you.
Yes.
I guess that maybe clarifies it for me because I was trying to figure out what it is that we're accepting. FEMA makes those maps, whether they're right, wrong, or sideways. Because I actually predate this. I remember when parts of Cremisa were underwater, and it was not in a flood zone. And I said, I rode a boat through this. I know it gets wet. Oh, no, they changed the maps. They didn't need flood insurance. So we'll never agree with what they put in a flood zone or what they don't. It's the national company and their subcontractors. But that's what it is. It's FEMA, it's the federal government. So what is the relationship? We just have to vote to accept it. Is that basically what we're
You're
going to be
voting
asked
to
do?
say these are the maps that the town is going to use to determine the building code and what's in the flood zone and what isn't. As far as property values go, if you pick up a newspaper or go online and start looking at waterfront properties, you'll already see the change. You know, I saw oceanfront property over in Plymouth area for, before this would have been $500,000. Now they're down to $300,000. And I'm sure that's why when you tell somebody not only they're going to be paying two mortgages now, one for flood insurance and one for their home.
Just for the Finance Committee's information, fairly recently the board authorized me to send a letter to Representative Keating asking for his intercession in Congress in this matter. And also, I've seen media reports where one of the bill's two authors, Representative Maxine Waters of Los Angeles, apparently not understanding the consequences of her own legislation at the time she argued for it, has now asked for the legislation to be reopened so that they can look at some of the cost matters. She's probably getting calls from all kinds of concerned people who are not happy that their flood insurance rates have doubled and tripled overnight. And being a longtime congresswoman, whether you agree with her policies or not, she's certainly astute enough to get herself reelected every time. And if she wants to do that again, I'm guessing that she's taking a long, hard look at this as well. So we're hoping to get some relief from Washington on this. But nonetheless, this is the article before us. We're stuck with it. As unpleasant as it is, I think we're just going to have to hold our noses and vote for it. Anything else on this, or are we all set? Okay, the next one is the Article 22. It's the Medical Marijuana Treatment Center zoning bylaw. This is also in at the request of the Planning Board.
As you all well know, there was a initiative petition last year that approved the use of medical marijuana, and the Department of Public Health was in the middle of formulating regulations. So last spring we voted for a one-year moratorium on a local bylaw to police these centers. The Department of Public Health has done their work, and we've had a little time to look at that and find a zoning district to put it in and a bylaw to explain it or regulate it. And that's what you'll have before you. We've chosen the institutional district, which is basically in and around the Toby Hospital area, figuring you have a lot of medical, that's the primary use in that particular district. And
questions? Thank you for that brief summary. Moving on, the next one on the list is Article 23. These are the proposed sign regulations to amend the zoning bylaws, also in here at the request of the Planning Board. This is another one that Selectmen Slavin and Whiteside really busted their humps on.
That was my first thing, was with thanks to Selectmen Slavin and Whiteside for their diligence on this. This is a compilation of all the sign complaints that have been heard over the last, I don't know how many years, and also trying to get rid of some contradictions and some areas that have been open to interpretation over the years. Tried to nail those down.
Questions from the board and also FinCom?
This just may be a general question. What we have in front of us is the actual article, but we don't have the information. So one of the things that, as a finance committee, that we try to do is we want to have all the information in front of us before we would further go, but we don't have that.
It wasn't available for you.
Okay, thank you. So that's just been just a normal theme with the planning articles this time around, and all the articles more or less. So, you know, you're not going to get a lot of questions from us at this point, maybe general questions, but it would be nice before we take our votes at a further date that we had the actual information in front of us.
Well, you know, we'll try to get those finalized copies to you as quick as possible. And, you know, a lot of this information is just coming through the door, but I think we have a finished version of the signed bylaw we can get to you.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions on this one? Okay, moving on. The next one is Article 24, zoning bylaw use table. This was also inserted at the request of the Planning Board.
This article may not go very far. We still need to review and see if there is an actual need to take this back to town meeting. This was the work of the planner trying to update our use tables to reflect what's already been passed at town meeting. And why it would need to go back to another vote, I'm unclear. I know there was some inconsistencies he wanted to correct, but I haven't been able to sit down.
Yeah,
and-
that was just my next question there. Why do we have to revote what we already voted? Just clean it up and publish the right version should suffice, I would think. I don't.
Well, if I can sit
If
down.
you can figure that out, I guess is the
Well,
question.
you have to look at the zoning bylaw and find out the changes that were actually made, and if they were already voted, then this is unnecessary. But I think there's one little corner of land that in the description of the BDOT is not in there. Is anybody going to lose sleep over that? I don't know, but.
No. Well, Mr. Fenton, who appeared before us earlier, certainly had a solution for you. Just go back to 2002 and be done. I don't really recommend that. That was more in the nature of bad humor.
But there were a couple of different printings of our zoning bylaw going back to 2005, and some things got left out or misinterpreted, and I think we've cleaned up a lot of those, but there were still some issues that were voted at town meeting and not inserted into the document. That doesn't need to go to town meeting if that's all it is.
Right. Understood. So this is sort of a placeholder, a just in
Exactly.
case. Got it. Next up is Article 16. And actually, that's all you've got, isn't it?
I think so. Change zoning statute. Oh, that's what you were referring to.
Yeah, I don't think you want to speak to this one. Thank you very much for your time tonight. We appreciate
Sorry,
it.
I missed that one.
Well, you can hang around and.
Oh, you haven't covered that yet?
What do you got? We did TDR, floodplain, medical marijuana
No,
sign.
sorry, I missed the petition article to go to 2002.
Oh, that was earlier. Yeah, we explained to the petitioner that there may be some procedural issues with that one. So.
If there's a particular problem that the planning board can help with, then we'd be happy to hear it. But
Yeah, it was suggested that if he's looking to solve a specific issue, then he may wish in the future to tailor his legislation very narrowly to address that issue.
or come in and talk about it. Let's see what the issue is,
Yep.
what we can do with it.
Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, this is an article number 16. Create a bylaw for civil fingerprinting of vendors. This was inserted at the request of the police department. As I understand it, Mr. Sullivan is equipped to address this. I don't see a badge on him, but I guess we'll have to imagine one.
I wouldn't give me a badge anytime soon. But really what this is safety of the public matter. The town licenses people to do business such as taxi drivers, such as the ice cream man, for lack of a better term. And right now, we don't do any extra check like the fingerprinting. In 2010, Governor Patrick signed a legislation that allows fingerprinting for certain business applications, and they are listed in here: hawking and peddling, junk, metal, secondhand dealers, pawnbrokers, house-to-house commercial salesmen, and hackney drivers or private drivers, taxis and such. Really what this is helping us do is tell the public that the people we've given licenses to, we've checked them out. We know who they are. And the extra step of the fingerprinting allows if a person has a fake ID or is using a false name and they have any sort of history or record, you're able to discover it.
Our brother is a metal dealer, as you know.
We've already checked them out. So.
Okay, thank you for that succinct explanation. Any questions about this one?
Just one question. The state, you're saying the state's put in laws for this already?
To allow the towns to adopt this.
So that's not a state law, it's something that we can adopt?
Correct.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Chairman, just very briefly. When I wrote up the article on behalf of the police department, and in doing so what I did was I consulted with the Attorney General to find an example of one that had passed. I was able to find one example that was partially approved, and partially disapproved. I took that, got rid of the bad stuff, kept the good, wrote some more stuff that was consistent with our bylaws, sent it to the Attorney General, who has pre-approved this bylaw should it be passed by town meeting.
And in the event that the petitioner forgets that you've already gone through the sort of ad hoc pre-approval process here, perhaps you could remind them of this fact once we hit town meeting.
Mr. Chairman, the Attorney General who handles these matters has made a specific notation in the Wareham file that she has looked at this and approved it.
There's a Wareham file?
Well, there is.
We won't ask any more about that. Any questions on this?
It struck me that you could go and get somebody fingerprinted, and then there's got to be a period where he should have a renewal of fingerprints, because things have happened in the intervening period that would maybe just not approve. He would no longer be approved. So is there a period for which the fingerprint is valid?
With your permission, Mr. Chairman. The way the bylaw is written up, it's for applications for these particular categories of licenses, including renewals. Typically, under Chapter 140 of the state laws, the period of a license is 1 year. So, assuming that you're going to be renewing an existing license, it looks like you'd get at least once a year look back at this sort of thing.
Thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Hurd?
Yes. I'm not quite sure what the definition of hawking and peddling is. And I'm wondering if that includes the vendors who show up at the onset festivals. And how does one apply for a permit and then be selling things the next week? Seems the fingerprinting process would take a fair amount of time.
Mr. Chairman, there's a rich vein of law that has dealt with the question of hawkers and peddlers. There are two types of, I'll call them vendors, who are out there. One group are called hawker and peddlers, the other are called transient vendors. And I'm just going to compare the two because I think that'll help. Counterintuitively, transient vendors are those people who set up in a structure or a tent for a period of time. Doesn't sound very transient to me compared to a hawker and peddler, but that's the way the law is written. A hawker and peddler is exactly the sort of person that you would see at one of the festivals. Somebody pushing a cart, selling silly string, goofy balloons, junk. Sorry to disparage their product, but there you have it. There are two types of hawker and peddler licenses, one that you get from the town and one that you get from the state. If you get one from the state, you do not have to get one from the town. So this would apply to town-issued hawker and peddler licenses under our bylaws.
Okay. Any other questions? Selectman Holmes.
I think that a lot of these vendors that show up for these one day, they're not sanctioned there by the town. They're working for that particular event, if you will, like the Blues Festival or the triathlon or some of those other vendors. They don't register with the town to be there. They sign up with the organizer of the event. So none of those vendors would participate. What is the added cost to the police department for doing the fingerprinting, doing the research on that fingerprint, and then maintaining this annual or every 3 year, whatever the permit process is?
You charge a fee to do it. So it would you charge a fee to do it.
So the vendor pays for that?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Hurd again.
Just to carry on what Selectman Holmes stated, does this mean that the vendors at the Onset Blues Festival would have to go to the town if they don't have a state permit? Or would they go there, set up, and then be arrested because they don't have permits?
Mr. Chairman, Like any good lawyer, I'm going to say it depends. If they have no license at all from the town or the state, then shine up the handcuffs. If they have a state license, as most of these folks tend to, they can set up without consulting with the town because they obtain their license from the state. And, you know, I talked about that rich vein of law. A lot of that rich vein of law involved the mining of the question of whether towns can control state licensed hawker and peddlers, because typically towns don't like to have strangers show up and skim the cream from an event when you have merchants who've been sitting there all year waiting for business to come their way. In fact, that's probably the fact pattern in 90% of the cases out there. So, in short, if they have a state license, they're there. There's not much you can do about it. You can tell them to keep moving along because even though the word transient isn't in their title, they have to keep moving along. If they don't have any license, they better show up to town hall or they'll have an issue.
Just one follow-up question. Does the state require fingerprints?
You know, I honestly don't know.
Okay, any further questions, or we mind this one out? Okay, the next one on the list is Article number 7. This is to authorize the purchase of a vacuum truck. Comes from the request of the Water Pollution Control Facility. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Directors.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
What do the rest of us meatballs?
I'm sorry?
Can't say good evening to the rest of us.
I'm sorry. I just was trying to move this along and give it the old quickie, but good evening, members of the Board of Selectmen. Pleasure. Good to see you all tonight. Good evening to the members of the Finance Committee. Pleasure to see you all tonight. We're seeking to purchase a VACCON, a Vactor truck. It's a piece of equipment at the Water Pollution Control Facility used to clean wet wells. We use it to clean manholes, tanks, many different things. We have a 1991 that is rusted. It's a rust bucket. And it's been repaired many, many times by Mr. Menard, and we're to the point where it's irreparable. So we're looking to buy another one. I got some quotes, $250,000 to $315,000 to buy a new one, and Mr. Menard suggested to me that we look used. Thought that was a good idea. So we're looking used. We've made some phone calls, we've inquired, and we found them between $70,000, $80,000 used. So we're asking for permission from the town meeting to purchase it from our own budget. We're not going to transfer any money from anything. It's going to come within our own budget. We just need permission to purchase it. We're going to write an RFP for this and put it out there. And there's many, many folks that have used equipment, and we're going to sit back and try to make the best deal for the town.
Thank you. Questions? Mrs. Donahue.
Same question I keep having. How much and from where?
It's coming out of our budget. In our budget, there's a line called, we put $100,000 in capital in our budget. Presently, in the budget right now, that's where it's coming from, within the operational budget of the Water Pollution Control Facility.
It was put in as requested as a capital line and saying capital, but we didn't have that realistically in the VADAR accounting system, so it's under other expenses. So.
Selectman Slavin.
Mr. Campina, we're going to use, it's a used vehicle. That vehicle is registerable?
I'm sorry?
Vehicle is registerable, goes on the road?
Absolutely.
Okay, so therefore it's not a capital item actually. Doesn't matter, still an account, but it's not under our capital plan. Because it's not a problem, it's just, you know, it's,
well,
new vehicles are
I would have just purchased it, but Derek said it was over $25,000, and he's my safeguard.
Well, I know,
Because
but-
I would have purchased it a long time ago, but he
I think-
he
I
explained
think-
to me that.
I think the
yeah,
$25,000 triggers
yeah,
for-
he told me that. So. He keeps me in line. He does
The
a great job.
$25,000 is for
Yes.
regular equipment, but we do have in the charter, it says new vehicles only. We went through that once before.
Oh.
Just so you know. I believe
Oh.
used vehicles bypass the process.
Okay.
So, yeah, so what he's trying to tell you is if you're looking for new vehicles at any point, you need to go through the capital planning committee.
Right, or buy used.
Or, yeah.
The VATCON actually has been on the capital plan for at least 5 years, and I think in the figure of $350,000, if I remember right.
Yes,
we were talking about finding some way, if we were going to buy one, to find other towns around that could have use for us so we could share. Even though we're buying a used one, if it's possible, that would be a nice way to recover some expense, to see if some of the town around us doesn't have one and wants to rent it from us once in a while.
We've inquired, and no one's been willing to partner, but maybe just on a strictly lease basis, that's maybe something we can look at. We've been looking at trying to purchase it together and use it together, and it was very problematic. But maybe in the sense of we could lease it and we're not using it, that may be something to look to investigate.
If you want, you can contact Serpent. I think it's Ross Perry over at Serpent, who actually works on regionalization and works on hooking communities up together.
And there's an organization called WHAM through the state, same thing, where water pollution control facilities and water departments, they can share equipment and share anything, personnel or whatever. As an example, there's a sick out, you can get involved in this program, and then you just figure out who's going to pay what. So there are programs we can look into to try to facilitate that. So
thank you.
We'll definitely look at it.
Anything else? Chairman McDonald.
I know you mentioned it was between 70,000 and 80,000, but in an article at town meeting, I don't think you can say between 70,000 and 80,000. So you're going to have to give us one or the other, or in the middle.
I was going to say what's free in the school budget, but no, just kidding. I was going to say to you less than $100,000 if you needed a number, because in that account is $100,000. So I would say $100,000, which would be less than $100,000. But if you needed a hard number, I would say $100,000. I think that's fair.
And when you put the account together for $100,000, was this what you had in mind for that?
I had in mind capital things, yes. This is one of the items.
Okay. And now
yes.
the other one is in disrepair and a rust bucket, I believe is what they call it. What are you doing in lieu of that?
We're leasing, if I need a vac, I lease, and it's approximately $1,600 to $1,800 a day to lease one. So it's pretty pricey, so it's best to buy one. And the used one is a fantastic idea, and I really want to commend Mr. Menard. He's the guy been repairing the old one for years, and to come up with that idea was fantastic, so we're excited about it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, the interesting point about this article is he's actually seeking permission to purchase it. He's not seeking to transfer funds or move them around. So he actually, people will want to know what the cost is, but I don't think he actually needs the number in the motion for it.
I guess if you have 100,
I'm seeing some consternation on town council's face at that one,
and also on the
Madam
chairman's
Moderator's
face,
nodding
too.
as well. So I think you might want to rethink that.
I don't know.
To raise and appropriate, really, because he already has them.
Yeah, he already has the funding for it. He's already got the line item for it. So he's actually looking to purchase a capital item. And that's what we're looking for. So this is one that it's going to be interesting. Sometimes we have good debates in our office.
I mean, we're not
I may
talking about
lose.
the office. We're talking about the town meeting floor, and I think it's if you're going to come before town meeting, I think it's critical that you have a number, whether or not you spend that much. And I know that you had 100,000 in there, but again, you know, if it's going to cost you $80,000 and you tell everybody $100,000, we go back to the problem we have in the past where, you know, we're way overshooting something, not because we don't know what it is or just because we want it to, I guess it sounds like, because it's in the budget. That's not a...
Well, what my thought is on this is I don't mind in the explanation, but when you put it in the motion, now you've created an article that has money in there. It's going to use up all that money. You will then need to have another article to vote that money out in the future.
Isn't that what we're doing is appropriate, says raise and appropriate?
Yeah, it's...
Right. Okay. I'm just... tell them, I know what's gonna happen. Okay.
How many days a year do you use this thing?
That's a good question. 23 to 40 days a year. And now with CMOM, we're in the middle of a renewal for our permit, and CMOM is mandating or requiring that we take more care with our infrastructure, so we'll do more line cleaning, which we'll use it a lot more. We'll do more line cameraing, and more cleaning of the wet well. So I see the use increasing from what we're using it now. So it could get more than that.
Is it a seasonal thing?
Year round.
So, I mean, Marion could use it 40 days a year, and Falmouth could use it 40 days a year, and eventually you'd get up to 200 days of use?
That's a suggestion about leasing it. In other words, when we weren't using it, to go to the surrounding communities and say, we have a VATCON available for a lease. So we'd have to get in the lease business.
What are the other
somehow.
vehicles within the region?
I'm sorry?
What other vehicles similar to this are in the region that might be available for us to share?
I question the local communities, and the ones that have them really don't want to share it with us. They don't have a lease policy. They won't let us use it. It's a pretty expensive piece of equipment. And then you have some risk. If I lend you or lease you my vehicle, if I don't have language that you're going to be responsible for the repairs, and you can ask Mr. Mott to speak to it better than I, but every time we touch that, it's quite expensive to touch anything on that. So the other communities are reluctant to lease us theirs or lend us theirs with some type of agreement.
If you use it 40 days a year, you're using it 20% of the year, which is not a lot of time for a user vehicle.
I understand. With CMOM, we'll probably increase that use, but again, to buy a used piece of equipment that we use 40 times, and a lot of times in emergency when we don't have the luxury of saying, oh, I'll lease one because I need it. In an emergency situation, if we have a sewer break, then I've got to go clean something up, as we did in Swiss Beach. I need a piece of equipment. I don't have the luxury of saying, okay, now where am I going to get that piece of equipment? And if I need it right now, it's nice to go to your barn, open the door and grab it and go to that equipment and use that piece of equipment. But for the investment, the $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, we've seen them as low as 50 and as high as 70. So in that range, the money I'm spending a year, the $20,000 to $40,000 I'm spending a year to lease it when it's available. On emergency, I don't get to lease it. So it just, to me, it makes more sense to have that piece of equipment. If it is 20% or 30% of the year, to have the piece of equipment, so when I need it, I need it. It's that critical.
No question about it. I just don't know what other things that you have and need that would be in the $100,000 a year category, that you're making a choice to get this and not get something else.
This is a choice we made because we actually have it. The one we've been repairing it religiously, and it's that value of a piece of equipment when we need it. Again, if I have a sewer block, I have no option. It's, and if I use it once a year, which obviously that's not the case, but if I was to use it once a year, the repercussions of polluting the bay or something like that is astronomical, so the cost can really skyrocket. So it's a valuable piece of equipment. One that we use regularly. It may not sound regularly 23 to 43 times a year, but to us it's quite regularly. So,
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes.
think I look at it, if you lease it for $1,600 a day and you use it 40 times, that's $64,000 in the year. And in 1 year, it's almost paid for itself, or more than. So.
I believe Mr. Hurd had a follow-up question. All set. Just one quick question. What's the life expectancy of a $70,000 to $80,000 used Vector truck?
That's a good question, and that's where rely on Mr. Menard. I think we can get the same use because of, as he was talking about, the restricted use. We have one that we paid, and I'm not so sure, I'm told, in the excess of $250,000 in 1991. And we've been babying it for the last, since I've been there, and before I was there, we've just been babying along and not using it to its capacity and repairing it extensively as we go along. Life expectancy, I'm going to say 5 to 10 years. That's probably a better question from Mr. Mott, who works on them. But if you ask me as a novice, I'd say 5 to 10 years on that used vehicle.
Yeah, I agree. At least 10 years, at least 10, possibly 15. I mean, the way we take care of things, we might be able to even stretch it 15.
So if we took 10 years as a minimum, multiplied it by 60 grand, that's $600,000 to lease as opposed to 70 to 80 to buy. So I think that statement speaks for itself in terms of an argument for what you're looking for. Anything else? think we're all set with this one. Next one on the agenda. Thank you, gentlemen, for...
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, was that a lawyer's answer?
Yeah, pretty much. I have a hard time taking that lawyer's hat off when I walk through the door.
Yeah, I kind of thought so, and I saw Mr. McDonald shaking his head as well. As somebody who's owned a Jaguar before, and I know town council has as well, it's not quite that simple when you're talking about a vehicle. When you have to put an $1,800 brake job on the car 3 times over 15 years, or you replace a motor, that number adds up. So just... We don't want to give the perception that it's just comparison on number of days lease versus purchase. There's a lot of maintenance that Mr. Menard.
Well, it sounds like if you buy the Jaguar vacuum truck, you're in a world of hurt.
Municipal maintenance will have to do a lot of work to keep that thing going for 10 to 15 years. So.
True. Next item, Article 4. This is a transfer from Waterways account to Harbor Master's Maintenance and Improvement account, $38,000. This is in at the request of the Harbor Master Department, and we have a Harbor Master coming up. Good evening.
How are you?
We're doing well.
Steve, there's some handouts.
Yeah, go to sleep. I'm gonna go to sleep soon. Oh, yeah.
I should have gotten 5, right? Was there 5? You need another one?
Alan's got one.
Yep.
Oh, buy my lunch.
Oops, sorry.
Oh, we've got one. Okay, why don't you give us the 2-penny version of what you just handed out to us here?
Very good. Okay, we have 2 accounts, the Waterways account and the Harbor Service account, which we'll discuss on the next article. This fund is generated through boat excise tax. I'm going to be requesting $38,000 out of that account towards the projects that we have coming forward. I'm requesting some of the funds be put towards a launch to be run out of Onset Harbor. That's to describe it, a water taxi. We're going to be able to service it out of Onset Pier. It'll assist with all mooring holders, transient vessels, marinas, yacht clubs. You could be at Burgess Point, say you want to come to Onset, they could pick you up, bring you into the harbor. There is a fee that's involved with it. There's also a seasonal fee that we're going to be looking at in the near future to propose to the selectmen with this project once it's if it's approved. The second portion of the article is the markers and supplies. We've got about 125 navigational aids that we maintain. This is the red nuns, the green cans, speed markers, swim floats, anything that's out there that's held by ground anchor. We do have to replace the chain. Chain is very expensive. It's probably about $1,200 a canister, and I go through probably 2 to 3 of them a year. And some of the markers, they do get struck. They break free. We just tried the upkeep and maintenance of them. So. We are also looking at the finishing of the 2 docks that were destroyed at Bessie Park back at Hurricane Bob that were never replaced. I would like to put those in. That'll give us 125 feet worth of dockage at Bessie Park. That's going to add another 50 feet of dockage to the existing dock setup there, as well as funds going towards Tempest Knob. I brought some plans if anybody wanted to look at them. Tempest Knob, we're looking at working with the Public Access Board of extending the access dockage on the left-hand side of the ramp, which is for wheelchairs or people with some mobility issues. And we're going to try and extend that dock all the way to the end and tie it into the face dock. So we'll have a large L-shaped floating dock system at Tempest Knob now, which will allow people to launch their boat, walk it down, get out of the way of the ramp. It's a busy ramp. We have a lot of boats that come in and out, and this will accommodate the boats for their temporary tie-up time. This will also allow us to put a dinghy dock system in the back of this structure, which will take all of the rowboats that are left all over the beach and all over the eelgrass that's coming back and put them on the docks out of the way of destroying any of the habitat there. And last is the Waterways public access signage. I don't know if I refer to Tempest Knob again. We really try to maintain Tempest Knob. We do it with signage. We do fencing around the porta potties now. We try to dress that place up and make it look good, and we keep it maintained all the time. What I'm trying to do is carry that type of entrance into some of our other areas, our beaches, Onset Pier, all these areas that people use for public access. They need to know what it is. Our signage is poor. I want to have consistency in everything, and everything is uniform. So this will clean up some of the beaches, and boat ramps, and some other avenues. So.
Thank you. Questions? Selectman Whiteside, and then Chairman McDonald. Oh, okay.
I think I'm jumping ahead, but Article 5 also speaks to the purchase of a launch.
I split the funds up between the two because I didn't want to completely wipe out the harbor service permit fees because we need to use that for seasonal personnel and things of that nature. So I had the Waterways Fund available also, so I divided some of the costs up.
Okay, so I had two questions actually. The total cost of that launch is $38.
$38, and that's extremely cheap. I did looked at a few different launches. There's a couple built out of Rhode Island. There's one built up in Gloucester, and there's also a Crosby launch, and we're looking upwards of $98,000 to $110,000 for these launches. Oak Bluffs actually bought a Carolina skiff, which I already have two in our fleet. I brought some pictures of it, and I spoke with the Coast Guard, and it's a fully certified launch. It's approved. And it's made by Carolina Skiff, and it's actually quite a nice setup. And I tried to look at a boat that later on down the road, if the launch isn't really pushing off, we do have a boat that we can utilize for other things. So with a launch, you can't. That's a 24-foot launch with a 9-foot beam. It can hold, I believe, up to 18 passengers.
Okay, so and my second question is, what are the balances?
The Waterways account has $51,000 available, and the second one, which I referred to as Article 5, is $182,000.
And those are funded by
boaters.
Purchase of
harbor service permits, boat excise tax, dockage, dinghy docks, pretty much everything on the water.
Okay, so we're going to have a launch service that services boaters at marinas and the yacht club, which is a private club.
Well, we're not. It's not a free service. It's a charge. They can if they show up at the dock and they want to go to a boat that's on a mooring, they can radio the launch service to come over, and what it'll do is it'll pick them up at the dock and bring them back to their transient boat. So
is the check in the mail?
No, it's actually it's a quite common feature. Marion's got 6 launches running right now, but
how do you pay? How do you
you pay cash. You can either do a seasonal pass, which usually ranges between $250 to $400, or you can do usually it's like a $5 one way or an $8 round trip fee. And so we're gonna play with it within those figures from what some of the other towns are charging.
I have a concern with handling cash. Not to cast aspersions on any person, but cash is...
There is a receipt process that we do with every cash transaction that takes place. So.
Selectman Slavin?
Who's going to run the launch, labor-wise?
It's just launch operators. We can put an advertisement out. It's a certification that goes through the Coast Guard to be a launch operator. It's actually pretty intense. They do drug testing. They do a full test. It's like a 6-pack captain's license. A little not as intense, but so we just run the advertisements for launch operators. And I think the course it's like $275 for somebody to take it.
Where are you taking the money to pay for that though? For that labor?
For the what? I'm sorry.
For the labor of the launch service.
Labor of the launch service will be out of the harbor service permit funds, and that's going to be Springtown meeting because we have budgeting.
Oh, so you're looking at 2015's budget for that?
I think we did labor costs of about $13,000 because they're seasonal employees,
Okay, but again, 2015 budget.
Correct, yes.
Okay. And the $38,000 is for a boat?
For the boat. And that's a full certification. That's the equipment, the life jackets, the EPIRB, railing systems, everything.
I'm familiar with in boating. We used to travel up and down the coast, and I understand how launch service works. I'm going to make an assumption that you're trying to put this in place to take advantage of the canal's 100-year anniversary and the 2014 celebrations.
I would like to say, yeah, absolutely. I think we have a year that's coming up here, which is going to be enormous for the town. So I think it's a good start, and our waterways are frequented quite a bit by transient people, and the sailboat community and stuff like that that's coming into here is building. So
I'll make one comment again. The boat itself at $38,000 is the capital item. I keep banging back at it, and I don't believe it's in the capital plan, so you need to somehow take care of that issue. I don't have a problem justifying it with what's coming up in the next year. The other piece, which you want me to get into now, Wade, is the updating the transient moorings. I'm assuming you're going to be using Helix.
Yes, I am.
You may want to explain to people when you get to that why they're doing that and what it does.
Okay. Do you want to go right on to number 5?
Selectman Holmes had a question.
Yeah, I just want to say that on the launch program, that was a great answer to Mr. Slavin. But this is really a program that's about 5 years behind or 6 years behind. This program is designed, and I don't know I haven't spoken to the harbor master about this in quite some time. This program is designed to bring the hundreds and hundreds of boaters who sit 75 yards off of our beaches into town so they can spend money in our restaurants and visit our fairs and go downtown into patron our people who have invested money in Wareham and have businesses here. That's what a launch program is for. Most boaters are not going to get on a launch and come to town to get a can of soda and go back. We typically store and we have many supplies on our boats to make sure that we can get through a weekend. I do have a few questions because to me, $38,000 where you own the boat, it's not in the neighborhood of the money that we've discussed in the past. This is very, very low.
I was surprised myself.
And that kind of bothers me a little bit, Gary, because, under whose name are we doing this? Is everything factored in here? The boat, I know there's a lot of special qualifications for the pilot.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
We've been through all that. But, I mean, if it's something that's being managed by Derek and you, there's a liability cost for insurance and things like that. And is that all calculated into this $38,000, or is this just the boat, the gear, and the pay some part-timers?
I've spoken with Maya. I can't remember the lady's name offhand, but
That's okay.
We're looking into a marina insurance policy in general for the town, and as well as tying in a factor of running the launch. So she's been working back and forth. She actually emailed me today, getting more information on it. So I think I'm comfortable with the number that I have here that can probably cover the cost too. This launch is actually very inexpensive, and I think it's going to serve the purpose of what we really want it to do.
Right.
We're looking at a hull figure, just the hull alone at maybe $8,000. It's really, it's a real cost-effective way to do this, and it's certified. And there's already 2 that are exact to this that are in operation. One was the Oak Bluffs I showed you, and I believe Tabor Academy's got one also.
And you said that you had other boats of similar nature?
I
or
have
was that somebody
actually
else?
2 Carolina skiffs that I currently use. I have an 18-footer at the pier right now, and I have a pond one, which is a 14-footer.
So you can pull one of those into action when...
Yeah, all the time.
You have people waiting an hour for the launch, because this is a big need.
Yep.
Especially in onset. It's huge. People get here. We don't have a launch. You can go to Marion, Mattapoisett. You can go to Falmouth. You can go to the Chart Room. You can go to any little harbor pretty much around us And the only place you can't get off is onset.
It's
for
a
the most
huge, huge factor for people wanting to pull into here, and you
and
see
Wareham
Yeah.
as well. And I assume that this program will extend to at some point to Bessie Park. And
It would be nice to see.
For
if
our
we could get it,
downtown
but definitely this pilot program running in Onset is key.
if you can make it there, you can
Yep.
make it anywhere.
If Onset's to work out well, this
Yeah.
would be a good boat that could be transferred over to Wareham for the costs and go from there. So.
And and in some towns, businesses even will give you coins or something. If you come in and you have lunch in their restaurant, they'll give you something to give the guy on the lunch to cover the cost of the lunch back and that sort of thing. So I think it's a great program. I'm just pretty shocked at the low dollars. And I want to make sure that it's all inclusive.
I was scratching my head myself at first until I
And
started
the second
breaking
question
it
I
down.
had for you is, which fund is the, like if you cite somebody for something, which fund does that come into?
Citations would go into the general fund.
Into what?
I believe the general fund, wherever.
That's the Harbor Services permits?
No,
fund?
for citations would go to the town's general fund under the bylaw
Fines and
violations.
fees.
What is our intake from Harbor Master citations
I would
for
have-
this year, do you know?
Zero. I haven't written the ticket.
Not one violator also?
Nope. It's it's an educational purpose. We talk to a lot of people. We pull into them. We talk with them, and that's our major approach.
However, I would ask, how many parking tickets have you written?
I don't want to talk about that.
I'm confused. Harbor Master's writing parking tickets.
Yeah,
Where he
especially-
doesn't write citations for safety violations.
Yeah, on the pier, we have.
On the pier?
Yep.
If there's a violation that needs to be addressed, I address it. But a majority of the people here, no, absolutely not. I have no problem writing them, but
Mrs. Donahue.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm very excited that this town might finally get a launch program that puts us on the map. I like that. I also like any program that brings income into the town. This is something that we talked about last year at the budget hearings, ways for departments to make money. So I'm excited about that. And I'm excited that you wrote the article with the amount of money and where it's coming from. So this is great. I do just have a vague recollection that there are some restrictions on the waterways account, and I apologize for not remembering. Is there any reason that these monies cannot be used, be transferred out of the waterways account for this?
no, there isn't. It's for I don't know to break it down well, but for enhancements to the waterways, law enforcement, things of that nature.
Good, perfect. And then just one other final question. Tempest Knob, we use state money to get it built out, but all of the maintenance and repairs are on us now. The state doesn't kick anything in there.
I've been actually working with the state. They've helped us out. They built some new docks for us already. They replaced 5, I believe, of the mobility docks on the left-hand side there. And the guy that runs it, the assistant director, he and I have been in talks with a few different locations in town where they really want to come in and kind of help us out, dressing up some locations. And I ran this project by him, and he's willing to see what he can pull off to assist us with
We
doing
take any
some
help
more.
we can get. That's
yeah,
good.
pretty
Thank
much.
Selectman Slavin.
Just for clarification, Carolina Skiff is a extremely heavy-duty workboat, bare bones. They build them at a low price because of the volume you can build them at, but they're not a cheap boat as far as function. They're extremely tough. You'll see commercial fishermen up and down the coast. Carolina Skiff is a good name because basically you see them all over the place fishing down south as well, so they really hold up well. They just are able to build at a price that's very competitive. Nobody can touch them. The other issue, of course, with Tempest Knob, we did take money, like we do every time, for the state, which we lose control of things. But that particular pier that was built in the specifications, I believe, if Gary, if I'm not correct on it, that wasn't really built to what we were supposed to get. So therefore, there should be some push and pull with them on that.
They've expressed to me that the actual fixed pier that goes out, they have no problems with whatever the town wants to do with it.
Selectman Whiteside.
I'm going to pick on you.
Okay.
A cigarette boat goes down the canal on a daily basis. I have no idea how fast it's going, but it certainly is going faster than the bicycle riding on the Stony Point Dike. Why are you not citing people who drive a boat like that?
The enforcement's like anything. It has to be done in the presence. We get calls all the time. We get there and there's nothing going on. If it's not in the presence of an officer, you can't cite for a misdemeanor violation. We do have a lot of people that we pull over. We pull people over on a regular basis, but we stop, we talk to them, we address the regulations, we work back and forth. We're better off building a partnership with the community than sitting out there and hammering people with tickets on the waterway all the time. So
I agree with that, but are you counseling the same individual?
We've actually got a pretty good rapport on the waterways. People are very good with us. Even at some other towns that work with us. We work with the town of Bourne, and they can't believe the amount of stuff that goes on in our town where people are very good about managing themselves.
So what you're saying is after you talked to me,
Yep.
because I didn't have my life jacket on, and I had open liquor bottles in my boat or something like that, and I was going to visit Mr. Holmes's boat, and I didn't have any running lights. So you're going to counsel me. Okay.
No, we're going to escort you back into the dock, terminate your voyage.
But are you going to counsel me?
Yes, we're going to explain the rules and the regulations, the rules of the roads and the waterways.
Okay, so I do it again next weekend. Now what are you going to do?
Then you get a citation.
Okay, so you have a record-keeping mechanism.
Yes, we have a log entry system that we have right at the pier, so when we stop something, it gets turned in.
Okay. Anything else on these articles, or are we?
Just one comment to follow up, and it's not on this, but actually it is, because citations are a deterrent. Right? Nice guy, we have a relationship, is fine, until the second offense happens and then there's a death involved, my friend. I've lived through it. I know it.
You don't have to explain it to me because I'm well aware of the citations on this.
Being a
and
nice
that's not
guy,
the scope of the discussion.
Well, it actually is, because it's about revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And revenue from citations come into the town. And being a nice guy doesn't prevent a death when some idiot decides, oh, hey, I pulled one over on the harbor master. And then you get there too late the second time, Gary. That makes a whole
And we
world
also
of
have
difference.
people that have citations that do the same thing.
That's right. And you charge them again, and then you file issues with them. But if you're taking a chance on some guy who figures I'm just going to pass one over and does it again and creates a death on the water, that's a real heavy burden to live with.
Absolutely. Sir. I fully agree with you, but I feel very confident the way we manage our waterways.
I think the results speak for themselves when I read about fatalities all up and down the coast, but I don't hear about them in this town. Boating fatalities specifically. Swimming is a different issue, unfortunately. We do have those here, like everybody does. But the one thing, there's a balance here that I think the Harbor Master Department has managed to achieve, which is that between enforcement and scaring people off. Because if you're in the tourist business, if you're in the attracting boaters to your port business, a friendly warning is going to go over with that person a lot better than a citation. Because what that citation says is, I got to pay some money to this town, and guess what? I'm going to go to a different town next stop. And that's where we lose out. So I would commend the Harbor Master Department for addressing violations in a sensible manner. And I think their track record, again, with the lack of fatalities in this town, speaks for itself. Thank you. That takes care of, I believe, Article 4. We've got Article 5, which is also from you, to transfer from Harbor Services permits receipts to Harbor Master's maintenance and improvement account the amount of $103,000. We already know where $28,000 of that is going. Why don't you talk to us about the rest?
Very good. Patrol, dockage, and vessel maintenance. This is the upkeep of one of the budget items that we removed from our budget, so it wouldn't come out of the town's funds to be able to. So we would pick up the cost, so the town wouldn't have to. That covers the dockage for 2 boats at one of the marinas. Recently, we moved our operation in Onset to the Onset Pier and eliminated about $7,000 additional in dockage. by moving to the docks that were already existing in town. So, and it's worked out quite well. It's easy to access our boats. We get out. We've been working with the fire departments a lot, and we're offering some dockage there. Dockage materials is a follow-up from the Bessie Park expansion as well as the Tempest Knob. This is just helping fund the project, and we try to build everything in-house because it saves us some money. So we build the docks, we buy all the fasteners, we get everything put together. The only thing that we would be requiring is the installation of pilings and the engineering costs, which I have actually already completed, which have been just waiting to be done. Safety equipment, we try to keep up on our safety, life jackets on our boats, our tow lines, fire extinguishers, EPIRBs. You end up with different repairs from some of the navigational equipment. We try to keep up on all the charts, but bringing basically, it's a jack of all trades on our boat, and it just keeps everything in good working order. Lastly, sorry, actually, this is not the last page. I'm also putting in for funding for a second full-time assistant, and because of the amount of stuff that we have going on, we've lost our herring agents through the budget cuts. We've lost a few things, and these are all tasks that we have picked up to manage. We've got about 7 miles of freshwater streams that we manage for the herring to go through. We deal with the smelt issues. We have a gigantic sales that come out of our office for dump stickers, and if there's a parking program going into place, these are all stickers and issues that are coming through us. It leads to the oversight of the waterways. It helps us with our propagation efforts, running the pier, maintaining the vehicles, maintaining the boats. We have a lot on our plate, and I do feel that it is necessary to have the right bodies. I mean, there's just 2 of us. Most of the surrounding towns around us, town of Bourne, town of Marion, town of Plymouth, all these towns within us they have 4 to 5 assistants, and we're working off of 2 here. And if I have a call where I'm going out and I don't have a backup, we have another guy there too. So we try to run the boats all the time with 2 people for safety. Excuse me. The budget replacement was unfortunately due to the circumstances we faced in the spring. This would be the deduction that we received in our budget through the seasonal payroll and also on our expenses end. And we're just refilling the operations in the seasonal payroll through the budget replacement from the cuts that had to be made. Updates to transient moorings. Currently we have 3 transient moorings in Onset Harbor. I'm looking to take the 3 that we currently have, which are all 500-pound mushrooms, and place them in a couple different areas that we have, and install a helix system with some environmentally friendly mooring. It's called either a Hazlet or it's called an eco mooring system. And what that does is we do have a big blossom of eelgrass going around here, and this is the system that is eventually going to be pushed into the whole mooring aspect. We're just ahead of the curve on it, and we're kind of working with what the Army Corps of Engineers is doing right now. And what this would do is this will give us, I think, 5 moorings. It would increase us by 5 helix moorings with the Hazlet systems. And what those systems do is they allow us to condense the mooring space into an area, and it keeps the gear from dragging around the grass. It doesn't disturb the bottom. It's a very good system, and you're starting to see a lot of them show up in surrounding towns. And part of our bylaw change last year was to institute part of this as part of our recommendations for some of the moorings that are going in. So that will give us 5 additional transient moorings in Onset Harbor, which are rentable. People come in, they use them all the time. If we have a boat that breaks down, they pick them up. They're used frequently. The printing and mailing is for the need of the waterways regulations. We print up a booklet so everybody has it, and it will cover the costs of mailing because it's we're going to be mailing out not only an invoice and some other items in our invoice packet, but we also mail the bylaw book out to every single permit holder in town, so they're aware of the regulations. And we make extra printouts to have for handouts just in our offices.
Okay, questions on this? Selectman Whiteside?
Thank you. Do the assistant harbor masters work year-round?
Yes, they do.
Okay. So you would, help me out here, in the summertime, in your heavy season, how many temporary or seasonal, what do you?
I had 8 this year, I believe.
Okay, so
Yep.
you would go to maybe into
I would actually
11-ish?
reduce it. I would reduce one position probably because we deal with the pump outs and things like that. So I'd reduce one seasonal position, and also we lost 2 herring agents.
So you would reduce more, is that what
I
you're
wouldn't.
saying?
Well, I would. If we have 3 full-time members,
Yep.
That one full-time member can make up for one of the seasonal positions. So I would eliminate one of the seasonal positions because of the scope that the full-time person can cover.
Okay. Question about when you are called out by the Coast Guard or, by a radio or whatever. How do you coordinate your responses with the fire department and or the police department?
Well, usually most of the calls will come through either fire. Coast Guard usually calls me direct.
Okay.
But my first line of response is the fire departments. They come with the manpower. They can come with an additional boat. Sometimes they come on with us, depending on the call. And usually, if they run their boat, it's good because now we have a second set of eyes on the water. Because you can't get a tow truck to where we're at. You can't get a fire truck. You can't get an ambulance. You can't get anything to where we are. And to have these resources coming out to you, it works quite well. Plus, I have a good partnership with the surrounding towns. Both Bourne and Marion pretty much come out for everything. And last week we were in a training seminar down the Cape for a week, and we've tied in with the town of Falmouth. We've tied in with a few other agencies, and we're all getting into the federal certifications for search and rescue, boat stops, training on high-speed response, all these different things to be able to certify us to be able to manage going through some of the conditions that we're facing.
Okay, great. And sort of a funny question, which I will ask last, but is the Helix what Marion put into their harbor?
Yes, they made it mandatory that every single vessel that was 24 feet and over had to go to the system. So people that had new moorings that were in place, they had to pull them out and go to this Helix system, and it can be costly. We've adopted it to the point where when your system fails, your upgrade, you have to come up to the new regulations. So we tried to be as user-friendly as possible going into that. So, we're starting to see some of the marinas are looking at it. Everybody's trying to step up to the bigger gear, and we're making larger chain, we're making bigger mooring systems for these boats, because we're starting to see a reduction in boats breaking free and dragging up onto the beach now because we're trying to make these changes. Scope is key. We can't offer that, so we have to go with weight or a good system.
So when Marion went that way, did it get more boats into the harbor? Do you know?
Marion's had their harbor gridded for quite some time. So I spoke with a few engineering companies that have come and talked to me about doing gridding in some of our higher density mooring fields, and they've reduced the price quite a bit because it's easy to do now, and we have the gear and the equipment to be able to move and do the changes that they recommend. So we're going to probably be looking at that the spring going into next fall on some of the high volume areas if we can look into gridding, because they turn the machine over to us and we just go out there and punch in the coordinates. They get all the information, then they bring it back to their system, and then they start printing out potential grid lines for harbors to manage the moorings a little more efficiently.
Sounds great. Last question. Mr. Sullivan, why does his office sell the dump permits?
It's been like that for years.
I know,
I think it was because we had dump stickers, we had beach stickers, we had shellfish permits. We had so many permits already going through, they just tied it all into one, and they did the parking and beach and the dump and all the other stuff.
Thank you. Selectman Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sullivan, as the boss here, is a full assistant harbor master position. Does that $24,500 include payroll, bennies, and all that sort of thing? And are you prepared to fund this on an annual basis?
We would still be pulling monies out of the harbor service permit fees to offset this. We're actually lucky to be able to use those appropriations to offset the cost of this department and what they've been doing. Now, the 24,500 probably wouldn't truly cover the benefits on there. You'd have to see. You won't know till whatever person is going in there, whether they're going to take family, single, or no plan. But at that cost, no, because we know that a health plan can be $18,000. However, with some of the people we've lost and some people that are not taking our insurances now, we'll be able to offset it.
So I take that as a yes?
That's 24,000.
Should I take, well, as long as you're prepared to answer that question in 3 weeks, that's fine with me.
If your question is, am I prepared to absorb, let's call it the hit to the budget, to the
It's a full-time
healthcare?
position. You're
Yes.
adding a full-time position back to Wareham that we didn't have before. It's a new position.
Correct.
And if you're willing to stand up and say that, then I think people will support you.
Any other questions on this one? Anything from the Finance Committee? Everybody looks pretty happy. Okay, then. With that in mind, we'll get to the big one. If you could give this, the 23-page thing, if you could cut it down to 3 sentences and just say, I'm looking to do...
I did a breakdown already for the Reader's Digest version, if you'd like that.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
There you go. It's the same wordings that you have in your packets, but just the top copy is the Reader's Digest version of the key points that are changed in the waterways.
Yeah, if you could maybe just explain to us what the key points are and sort of what the philosophy is here.
Absolutely. May I just pass the rest of those to you? Thank you very much. Last year we adopted Section 2 and 2A, which was our mooring standards. The remainder of the bylaw was Section 2B. That was more of the enforcement, the definitions, things of that nature. What we ended up doing is I looked at towns from Dartmouth to P-Town to Duxbury and went through their regulations. We didn't try to recreate the wheel, but we tried to adopt some of their policies and fine-tune them to our needs. Some of the key changes that you'll see in the packet or in your previous handout would be it gives you a little more direction on your guidelines for applications, for a waiting list, approval process of trying to get a mooring in town. It's a first come, first serve, regardless of residency, to get a mooring. One of the other things that we have a problem with, our existing bylaw was good, but over the years of using it, I think we had it for about 14 years in operation, we were able to see some of the loopholes that you could get away with a lot of changes, and there was nothing we could do really. So we were able to, I think, patch some of those holes quite well through this next proposal. One of them is a requirement for vessel verification. When you get your harbor service permit, a lot of people tend not to update their information, even though we give them that option in their invoice. It breaks it down so they can give us their boat info. Usually they just sign it, send it back in. This is going to require documentation that says, I own this vessel. A current documentation certificate from the United States government, a Massachusetts registration or a state registration, and if you have a vessel that is not registered, we issue a certificate of ownership from us that basically that we take a picture of and we can store it in our database so we know what the boat is. And actually it works pretty well because we have a lot of things that can get stolen and we can come back to it and use that as a reference. That will get rid of a lot of people swapping moorings, sharing moorings, putting people's boats that, we had one break free today where he had a 20-footer listed on it and he had a 25-footer sitting on it and now it's on the beach. So we'll be able to track it a little better through there. It gives a guideline of our mooring inspectors that we currently have that are required to do the inspection process every year. We defined them as a mooring service provider because installations are becoming a little more difficult for people because they can't maneuver the gear. So this is going to give the person that is putting these systems in and offering inspections and winter sticks and mooring balls and upkeep some guidelines under us, what we're looking for, so they can stay maintaining be maintained as a mooring inspector for the town. The original bylaws were really vague for some of the marinas and the yacht clubs, and this isn't to hurt them, but this is more to protect them. It turns it into a commercial mooring. It holds them to the requirements that everybody else does, and it puts them into a level that's the other towns right now surrounding us are doing. We've never done a commercial mooring thing here, and this is something that it was inevitable. We have commercial moorings which are federally licensed. They are in mooring fields, and they have their own setups. So this is just giving them some direction on what they need to do to become providers. When it steps outside of the mooring fields within the marinas, we do have some places that have commercial moorings that are within the town mooring fields. This gives them the guidelines. So we have a few moorings that are just rented out because they're determined to be commercial through their federal license. This gives them the definition that they have to work off of our waiting list to make sure that they utilize the people that want that location, that their vessel is able to fit in that area. So they're taking the person off the waiting list that we maintain. So it's fair across the board. So everybody is able to utilize a space. Guidelines for swim lines. We have swim lines showing up everywhere. People are putting them out hundreds of feet past their house. They're putting them all over the place. This breaks it down a little bit and gives them some guidelines. I don't mind if people have swim lines, but they've got to mark them properly so people don't sit. They don't get their boats tied into them. They're not just turning into an entanglement out there. One of the issues that we've been facing is the amount of rowboats, kayaks, sailboats, dinghies, junk that they're leaving all over the town's shorelines. We see it in Onset, we're seeing it some in Wareham. The beaches are being covered with these boats, and then now it's starting to blend into the lawns that the municipal maintenance is mowing. They're putting them all over the eelgrass or the beach grass, and it doesn't look good. This is organizing it. This is going to allow us to designate locations. It'll be a permitting process where the boats are allowed to anchor in these locations, and they can we'll be able to identify who they are, and it'll also start cleaning up some of the shorelines. Raft policy, we have we tend to keep getting more and more boats rafting. They come in an anchor, and you tie 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 boats together, and they're not putting the proper gear out, and they're dragging. This allows us to break them down if we feel that it's a hazard. Under certain conditions, they're not allowed to do it. They can't leave a raft unattended. We have people that just pack up and they go into town, and we've got 10 boats on 3 anchors out there, and they can do it. So this kind of keeps them at bay a little bit. There's some freshwater regulations that were changed. The permitting process, it does go into the freshwater ponds, and that it's the same as being on the saltwater. A vessel that's consecutively moored in the waterways is required to purchase the permits. It's for great ponds and ponds over 10 acres with public access. Lastly, one of the bigger changes was Blackmore Pond. The horsepower restriction was 5. We increased it to 10. Those were the biggest changes in the regulations. There's still regulations in place in the bylaw that cover operation, jet skis, water skiing, tubing, the multi-use areas. So we still carried a lot of the stuff over from the original bylaw. We left it in place because it works. We cleaned it up and went from there. Sorry it took so long.
No, there's a lot here. We have a question from Selectman Whiteside.
This looks like a really comprehensive document.
I'm surprised I haven't lost more hair.
Okay. Congratulations on putting together something that looks like it will work really well. I just have one question. Swim lines. How can people put swim lines out when they don't own the water?
We've had them in the town. They're all over the place, and they've been like that for years.
That
I'm just
doesn't-
trying to. I understand, but we're
Well,
trying to.
Can I ask Mr. Bowen that question?
I don't know. It is possible that some may have subsurface water rights. And in my experience, when I've seen things like swim lines or private docks or floats, it's been a situation where somebody does have some subsurface ownership right. But in general, I don't have an answer beyond that.
So I guess my question back to you is maybe you need to, we may have had them forever and ever and ever, but that doesn't mean that they were legal, appropriate.
True. I'm not opposed to. We're allowed to have people put floating systems out there to be able to protect their areas, and I'm not totally opposed to people being able to do a couple swim lines, because I understand where they're looking at. They're looking for the safety of their family being swimming in front of their waterfront property. If it's a navigational hazard, or we feel it's in a mooring field, or it could be an obstruction to, passage. In a high volume area, we have the right to deny it and remove it. So, I mean, a lot of them are associations. Parkwood Beach Association has one. Nanumet Beach Association has one. Oneset Heights has one, and now I believe Indian Mound has one. And a majority of it are the associations that are putting it at their association beaches. We just want to kind of give some guidelines as to, if they're going to put them out there, it's visible, you can identify it, it's marked properly, and it's good for the boaters too, because they have to adhere to the regulations also for speeding within 150 to 300 feet of a swim zone. So I think it's finally giving us a base, at least, where we really didn't have anything before.
Any other questions on this? Yes.
To follow up on that question, so if the harbor master approves it, you own it. You're liable for those swim lines, Mr. Bowen. You may want to jump in here. He says that he can either reject them or approve them. If he approves them, as the representative of the town, he owns them. Might want to argue that.
Yeah,
And you can make an argument for anything, but
True.
But the fact that he stamps his approval on it as the harbor master, the town would own it.
That's certainly an argument that we're going to hear. I can give you the flip side of it and say that we're not an insurer, we don't warrant it, that there's an exemption under the Mass Tort Claims Act, Section 10A. But you're absolutely right. It's an argument that we're going to hear.
And that could fall under us, the guidelines of issuing a mooring for somebody. It would act as the same feature. We have to.
Yeah,
we designate. I fully understand what you're saying.
You're approving that mooring, and
Yep.
you're renting that space. Yep. We're talking about swim lines that people are putting on property they don't own, and then you approve them, Gary. That's a big difference between somebody paying you $1,500 for a mooring and you approving private citizens, associations or not, private citizens in federal water, this swim line, and then you approve it. And then some kid hangs himself on it, God forbid. And they come back and say, well, the harbor master inspected it, he approved it, and my kid died there. Right?
Could we recommend to turn it into a permitting process? It's held by ground anchor. It's Chapter 91, so.
Almost like your first comment that it's been going on for years and I just haven't, we don't pay attention to it. But when you stated that you approve it, then you own it. And that liability turns the whole corner there. And they can come and say, the harbor master said it was okay. He approved it. He didn't reject it, because you say you have the right to reject or approve. Now I own you if something happens to my kid, or God forbid, even worse. My question, though, was, I wanted to comment on that because Mrs. Whiteside raised a good question. My comment on the personal watercraft section in D, so this will now eliminate finally all, it appears, all of the jet skis, water skiers, rafties, rafters, and all of the bull that goes on between your pier, actually the bridge, and the canal.
It doesn't
There'll be no more
eliminate it.
people there.
Yep.
On rafts, water skiing, and doing all that stuff between the channel and all those moorings and private boat yards that I'm hearing about here. Boats, docked boats, and docks on the right, moorings on the right.
It does not.
They're very close to the channel there.
I understand
So this will eliminate that.
That will not eliminate it. It's that area was designated as a multi-use area back in 1999, and that area is designated for higher speeds. They do still have to.
Are they not responsible for their wakes?
Oh, they absolutely are.
Because it also says in here that they're responsible for their wakes.
They are.
In a no-wake zone.
They're not in a no-wake zone. They're actually in a multi-use area, which is between.
Their wake goes into a no-wake zone.
Yeah, but they're within it. They're exceeding the distance passage.
This is part of the issue I have with citations. I sit there, and you see it from your office, or someone has to see it if they're looking out the window. And you get guys who race from that bridge all the way to the canal every weekend. And you can sit there at 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock and watch the same guys zip right past you. First of all, they're not supposed to be going that fast.
I understand that.
And then you have kids in the water in these little areas, especially when you're coming in on the left there. There are mooring fields there full of boats. So where does the 100, so you're not really protecting people in that area at all with this. This does not affect that area.
This portion was transferred over from the original bylaw that was passed for the multi-use area. We just carried it over, and the wording just is basically exact to Chapter 90B in the CMRs for
But you're
operation.
changing this is an updated bylaw too.
It is updated, but we don't have to update every single thing if it's
So
already in place.
nothing changes in that area with this bylaw.
No,
I
nothing
guess
changes.
That was
in
my
that.
original
No,
question.
it was designated because of the location, the
Still a
size.
danger zone, and we're not thinking of making any changes there, because that's very dangerous.
I mean, if somebody wants to change it to a no-wake zone at the town meeting, then that's something they have to bring it up.
Should be bringing that forward for safety.
Yeah, I understand, but that area was designated as a.
channel coming in. And
Oh, I
know
hear you,
where
but
I'm talking about, and
that
water
area was
ski is-
designated as a water ski zone before that, and the town didn't want to sit there and say, we're promoting a strict water ski area, so they turned it into a multi-use area. Once a boat sets hooked there or something like that, and they're operating within the vessels that are anchored, that's when we step into play and we actually slow them down, we turn them, we push them away from the different areas. Because a lot of people still enjoy the going out there and water skiing, and it's the families and it's the people within there.
I was hopeful that would correct the situation, but it's not. Maybe next year.
Any other questions on the article before us? Okay, I think that takes care of you for the evening. Thank you for your time. We
Thanks.
appreciate it.
Sorry to keep so long.
There's a lot here.
Take care.
Next up, we have Article 6, line painting. This is in at the request of municipal maintenance. And not seeing Mr. Menard still here, I'm guessing we're going to hear from Mr. Sullivan on this one.
Yes, sir. On the line painting account, this is traditionally what they've done is taken money from the receipts reserved for appropriation onset pier account. When looking at it, if you look at how we set up the revenues for the budget this year, $30,000 is already coming out of the onset pier account. It's in the revenue section. We're going to request to remove an additional $25,000 for funding the parking kiosk program later. That, as of right now, would with our collections would only leave several thousand in the account, And I would say at this point for the line painting, we will not have enough money to fund line painting for fiscal 2014. So I would move that there'd be no action on this article. Yeah.
Any questions on the no action? I didn't think so. Next up is the Article 19. This was inserted by the Board of Selectmen at the request of the residents of Cranberry Lane for the Selectmen to lay out the way. Selectman Slavin, I believe, has some information to update us with on this.
This is the first street acceptance that we are following with our updated rules that Attorney Bowen put together. The planning board was requested to go ahead and do what needs to be done under these rules to make sure the road meets all the current regulations, stormwater management, et cetera. Everything's in place. The planning board instructed Charlie Rowley, who's helping them, to go ahead. Mr. Rowley came back at the planning board meeting yesterday and had a list of 8 items. Out of the 8 items in question, 4 are already taken care of. Everything else should be done in the next 2 weeks. What will happen is this article will stay as it is on the warrant. When it actually comes up at town meeting, if everything is not signed off and done, that the Board of Selectmen will pull the article. If not, then we'll go ahead and allow the town meeting to vote on it. Town meeting votes to accept, it still has to come back to the Board of Selectmen for an actual acceptance, the way the process goes, just so there's no confusion there. The bottom line is, if everything's in place, everything has been done, but they have to make sure the road meets all our standards. Planning board will come back with a final answer, hopefully within 2 weeks, which we'll have plenty of time. But right now, it's sitting in limbo because not everything is done yet. I hope I'm not confusing anybody.
Any questions on this one? Yes, Chairman McDonald?
Is it going to cost us anything?
0.
All right. So maybe some of the language in here, it just leads you to believe that it might cost you.
No, because the way it's put together with the form and everything has to be signed off, all the steps, all the requirements in order to accept it. We accept the road at that point unless we're buying an easement, and then it could be for $1. But basically, at the time we're taking it, it's a new road condition, stormwater management, everything is in place. There will be costs down the line when you accept any road when it wears out, but initially there is no cost.
Any other questions on this one? Okay, moving on. We are up to Article 1, transfer funds from RRFA to school budget. This is in at the request of the town administrator. Please speak to this one.
Yes, this would be in Winter Storm Nemo, the Wareham High School experienced substantial damage in the form of water, I believe, leaking from a radiator system as well as the other damage. The funds that we received from our insurer were greater than $20,000 for this. So what happens is they go into an account called the Receipts Reserved for Appropriation in excess of $20,000. In order for the school to have those monies, that actually takes a town meeting action to move them out. The high school principal wanted to perform the work when the students were out in January to make the major repairs for it. We asked that it wait till after the fiscal year because we could not provide him with the funds. So what this is taking the funds out of that Receipts Reserved for Appropriation account, the insurance recovery money, and putting it into the school budget so that they are reimbursed for the costs they ensued in FY14 for the repairs to the whole system.
Questions?
How much are we talking?
There's always that one low point that you forget. It's that what we received and the costs are $54,740.55.
Okay, any other questions on this one?
What's the difference?
Selectman Holmes?
What's the difference?
That's what the cost to the school actually is for it. There's
They've
nothing
already
else we
expended
could
the money?
use. We couldn't expend those monies. They did after July 1, but there's nothing else we could use those monies for.
was just wondering if some of that money could be used for the 60 grand for the roof. You can't use that.
No, it would,
It's wishful thinking.
Anything else? Okay, next one up is Article 2. This is to establish and fund other post-employment benefit liability trust fund. This is inserted at the request of the town administrator. Would you speak to this one, please?
Yes, this simply is what it says, to establish the OPEB or other post-employment benefit liability trust fund. It does not necessarily mean that we have the funds to be able to put in there, but we actually, every year in our management letter, we're cited for not having the fund itself. So we're taking the step in the right direction to make sure that we have this available.
Any questions from the Finance Committee on this? Selectman Slavin.
This particular item, we probably should thank our former chairman of the Finance Committee, Mr. Paulson. I probably get an email at least once a week on this particular issue, and unfortunately, we're not putting any money in yet, but at least it's the first step to a long road. Thank you, Mr. Paulson.
Yes. Anything else? Okay, moving on. Article 11, this is to transfer funds, parking kiosk program. Again, at the request of the town administrator. Please speak to this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This will be to move funds out of the receipts reserved for appropriation onset pier parking account to an account under the town administrator. That this is what the article creates. It will be to pay for some of the costs of some of the signage and such that you saw that went up on CW Bishop, and also for be able to purchase additional kiosks once we have the parking program implemented, and we also receive the information back from the CETA parking study in onset. And the amount's $25,000, if I didn't say that.
Questions? Okay. You had one about 2 hours ago? Has it slipped out of your mind?
That's why I wait till the end.
Yeah. Sly dog you are. Next is Article 12, fiscal year 2013 unpaid bills. I'm hoping we don't have a lot of them.
We don't have any.
Chairman McDonald.
That is significant. In the past, we've had several of these. Now, that's not to say that we won't have one at the last minute, but that's kudos to the town accountant, kudos to the department heads, and kudos to the town administrator.
Yes, thank you for illuminating that point. Next up, Article 14, appropriation transfers, again at the request of the town administrator. And what's this one all about?
This is the interdepartmental transfers. You usually use it to make amendments to the budget for the ensuing fiscal year, anything that wasn't covered in Springtown meeting. The one transfer that we will be looking for as of right now is to transfer approximately $32,000 into the planning department salary line. We are looking to fund a full-time planner position, town planner position. We've seen what work has been, you've seen what work has been done by Selectmen Whiteside and Slaveman that could have been done by a full-time planner, and make sure that what's being done in the town is covered. Not having a full-time planner is really, I think it's an issue for a town.
That's only, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Right. You know, and that's only on what, 3 issues that just came up, not to mention the whole list of issues that I see George shaking his head too. Now, there's a whole list of planning issues that have not been addressed, and we can't keep having Mrs. Whiteside and Mr. Slavin go in and do the planning work. We need them to do a bunch of other stuff. Don't hit me. But now, and you know, listen, we tried the part-time thing, sharing. you know, some would argue that some of these things like the TDR and some other areas could have been accomplished a lot sooner if we had a full-time person working on the job. With all of the new business coming into, I think you're right on track. It's just that you're going to have to, you know, plan to fund this every year as you're adding these new positions back in, right? So I'm with you on that. But I believe we need to have a full-time planner, unless we're going to make the planning board full-time, right? Because you're still a volunteer group, right? Yeah.
In order, I understand in order for the selectmen or the finance committee vote on it, they're going to ask where the funding's coming from, and that's where and that's where we're sort of updating our projections for the year and trying to use the most recent numbers that we have. So that's not an answer to where, but it's just telling you the process we're going through.
Thank you. Anything else on that?
Those are the only ones that we have in our site right now.
Okay, last one on the list, Article 15. This is to fund ratified union contracts. Again, the town administrator, please let us know what's going on with this one.
We don't have any additional funded union contracts. We had funded we had put together the steel worker, the upper and lower, or units A and B, which sounds better. And what I'm looking to do is seeing if we do have enough money within the lines of the departments to cover that, and just make sure that the projections are right on for it, because it's always worse coming in April and trying and see whether you have it or not. We do have funded lines from before, articles from town meeting for such appropriations that we could use. But obviously, if we can do it within our budget, I would prefer to do that.
Any questions?
I would have just asked, that's another one that we're going to have to hold to last minute as well. But when you come to explain it to us, try to come with us with a little more detail of maybe, I don't know if it's appropriate for us to get the detail of what the changes were in the contract. It helps us to understand better.
Yeah, absolutely. The easiest way to put it, and it's signed, well, it needs a couple more signatures, but it's a signed and ratified contract. And what it did was it gave them a step 6, which most of the other departments already had, or all the other unions already had, which is a 3% increase. You only get that after 10 years. So we had a lot of department heads that had been here for 17 years, and they'd already maxed out their steps. So there would be a 3% increase on that. The Unit B, if you will, has more members and was almost a similar cost to what Unit A was, which is the department heads, and it's approximately $20,000 altogether. Where if you're funding it from one department, that's an issue from the budget-wise, but spreading that out throughout each department, we might be able to cover it. So.
Well, any questions on that? Well, that wraps up this portion, the joint meeting of the FinCom. I was remiss, Chairman McDonald.
No, he was just tapping you on the arm.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to, I was remiss earlier in not recognizing the 2 newest members of the FinCom, 3 newest members of the FinCom, Mr. Hurd, Mrs. Fonts, and Mrs. Jordan. Looks like you got a good bunch here. They were very attentive during the meeting, even at times when I was questioning whether I was. But a fine job, and I guess that's that.
At this point, we appreciate you having us here, and this actually works better to go over this one time, even though, so in lieu of, just because we're going to have a meeting tomorrow night, if you guys are bored, we're going to do this over again, only now we're going to have discussions. So if you're bored tomorrow night, and I know Alan's always bored, so he'll be there tomorrow night.
Yeah, Alan's the most bored guy in town from what I can see.
Yeah, we're also, one of the things tomorrow night, if we can get from Derek or Mr. Sullivan through the Board of Selectmen, is a little more, what is it, the backup, the actual article backup. I think we have some of them, but we don't have all of them, and it's very difficult for us to vote on a little blurb. We need a little more detail on that.
Absolutely.
And then we just, right. We have to write the advice, and it's something that we use to write the advice for town meeting.
Okay. Go ahead.
Selectman Slavin?
Ms. McDonald, probably if you want to ask Kelly tomorrow to sit with Brenda Sampson in the same office, they should have a copy there of the marijuana bylaw for everybody to have a copy. They'll also have a copy of the latest TDRs, which I gave you as well. Also the signed bylaws, it's all in the same office there. So anything you don't have, that should be available right there on that. I apologize for not getting it to you at the time.
And do you want us to close our meeting before you close your meeting? Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
All right.
We still have I don't even know if we're going to do them, but we still have a couple of items on the agenda anyway.
Okay, well, we have, tomorrow night, we'll have a meeting at 6:30 in this room, so please pick up your bottle so we don't have to pick them up for you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second somewhere? All those in favor? All those opposed? Anybody opposed? Okay, other than in the back, and no abstentions. Thank you very much for having us.
Well, thank you for coming in. Thank you for your time. Thanks for hanging in there and helping us get through this in one night. I'd also like to thank Madam Moderator, who has been quietly sitting over yonder, listening to everything, taking voluminous notes, and conducting her own preparations for town meeting. Thank you as well. Okay. Let's look at the agenda here. I guess I
was going to ask for citizens' participation.
Yeah, do we have any citizens? We kind of bull rushed that one tonight. No citizens?
Yep.
Okay, next I think we can jump down to 9D. Any other town business not reasonably anticipated? Does anybody have anything?
No.
That's a no. Mr. Sullivan, would you like to deliver a report tonight, or are you tired?
Well, I think we're all tired, but I just wanted to thank Mr. Iafredi and all those that worked on helping and Mr. Moore for the Greer lumber to be able to bring that down to make it safer for the town. I know it's the owners that brought it down at their own cost. We obviously all wish that it happened sooner, but we appreciate the efforts to get that done.
Okay. We have a couple of selectmen with their hands up. Selectman Holmes.
Mr. Chairman, last week I brought before the board what I considered a pretty horrific incident regarding sidewalks post-storm. And I told the board Wednesday morning I would go take pictures. I did go take those pictures, spoke with the gentleman and his wife and their two lovely small dogs, who I call boys, because that's just, we're in the family of small dogs, right? I took those pictures as promised and sent them to Mr. Sullivan. He, with a comment basically saying this is bull or something like that, and he, we took action. I saw a return picture today. I hope you sent that to the whole board. Did you send that return picture to the board? If you wouldn't, would you please do that?
Absolutely.
And I want to thank Mr. Sullivan and the young man who was sitting here. I forget his name.
It was Mr. Menard on it.
Mr. Menard. And what an outstanding job and a quick response they did. And I would ask you to also share those pictures I sent you with the board as well. I didn't want to do that for fear of bringing too many people into the scene. But outstanding job by you and your day-to-day, Mr. Menard. It was horrific to see how anybody could walk through there, let alone try to get a wheelchair through there. And so I want to thank you and publicly acknowledge your efforts and that of Mr. Menard to get that done. And I'm sure that you'll probably get an email soon from the gentleman and his wife who live there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for that report, Selectman Holmes. Selectman Whiteside.
Liaison report. Clearly, I went to the school committee meeting last week and saw the presentation that I spoke about earlier. And then I poached one of your positions, my dear. Yep, I went to the recycling center, which you are the liaison to, and got a 45-minute tour. In terms of the school, the new business manager is a breath of fresh air. I know I've spoken with Mr. Sullivan about working with him, and is very pleased with the relationship so far. I had lots of questions about the recycling and why the town runs a recycling when private contractors do, things like that. But those will all be things that I will discuss with Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Holmes, because Mr. Holmes is really the liaison.
Thank you. Selectman Slavin?
I'm going to give everybody a break tonight. There's a bunch of things, but we can wait till next week.
Thanks. Likewise.
That's typical.
So he's asking us for a motion to adjourn.
We set you up. I got a devious. We got a devious clerk over here. No, that was good information. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
We've got information, but it's too voluminous.
I think also, we had that National Grid piece. Was that the same one, or is that a different one?
Nope, you're done.
Okay, never mind.
Let's have a motion to adjourn, please. Motion made by Selectman Whiteside, seconded by Selectman Holmes. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? 4-0-0. Thank you to everybody who's came in here tonight. Thank you to the citizens petitioners. Thank you to the department heads. Thank you to the committee people who stayed. And thank you to the FinCom, Madam Moderator, Town Council, Mr. Sullivan, and the rest of the board. Good night.